The next item is please make a note to silence your phones before the beginning of the meeting. And we'll begin with a roll call. Please introduce yourselves, beginning with my right.
My left.
John Walters, Indian River.
Pete Berkeley, Grand Rapids.
Dave Anthony, Fort River.
Scott Bowen, Grand Rapids.
Brandon Felix, Traverse City.
Good morning, David Nyberg from Marquette.
Hi, good morning. Not a member of the commission, but Nathan Gamble from the Attorney General's office.
Approval of the agenda for the day's meeting, September 11, 2025. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, move to approve the agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second, I do have an addition, however. Before the Natural Resource Commission reports, the commissioners' reports, I would like to add a Fisheries Committee report and a Wildlife Committee report.
Can you make a motion to amend it?
Oh, excuse me, I need to make an amendment to that. So I move that we add a Wildlife Committee report and a Fisheries Committee report prior to the Commissioners' report.
Second.
Do I have? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Noted.
Now we need to approve the agenda.
The agenda was moved by Dave Nyberg, seconded by John. And please note. Approval of minutes.
You need a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Mr. Chair, move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second?
Second.
Moved by Nyberg, approved, seconded by Pete. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Adopted. Next item. Approval of minutes. Approval of the August 14, 2025 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Moved by Walters and seconded by Brandon. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Adopted. Director's report. Now I'd like to turn the meeting over to Director Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we begin with our normal agenda, I want to make a few comments about the budget situation. I think you're all aware that the House dropped the budget, and the Senate has essentially moved the Bumstead Cherry bill forward. So the bottom line is we want to do more for our natural resources. That means investing in habitat restoration. That means tree planting, other long-term efforts, work that may not yield visible benefits for hunters and anglers for decades. But we must take the long view. Managing our natural resources requires 20, 30, even 50-year planning horizons. Our long-term goals demand long-term funding that keeps pace with inflation and maintains the full scope of the work. Without it, the alternative is simple. Tell us what to cut. Right now, we represent just 0.5% of the general fund budget. That's for fisheries, wildlife, parks, all state forest lands, 4.6 million acres of state forest lands. You fund what you value. Budgets are how the political system expresses our shared values and needs. If we truly value our woods and waters, our forests and our streams, we must fund the work that sustains them. We have the greatest freshwater fishery in the world, the greatest white-tailed deer population. Some say maybe too many deer. I know that's not true everywhere, but the greatest park system in America. That's a fact. Those are 3 facts. We're doing something right. These people wearing green shirts are doing something right. They're not doing everything wrong. All right? We have a great system that needs the support of hunters and fishermen. The DNR doesn't need to be defunded, it needs reinvestment. 85% of our budget is funded by user fees, and it's just math. If the number of users is declining, and that's a national trend, at least in hunting, and the value of the dollar is eroded by inflation, the balance must come from cuts or from increased funding. We're not at a breaking point yet, but we're getting close. That's why we support the bipartisan bill introduced by Senator Bumstead and Senator Cherry. It's bipartisan, it offers a path forward. It's not just us. The bill has the support from across the spectrum of users, the NRA, Farm Bureau, MUCC, Trout Unlimited, Ducks Unlimited, the League of Conservation Voters, the Sierra Club. All these groups, often at odds on other issues, are united behind this legislation. We are stewards of 21% of the world's fresh water and over 4 million acres of forest that protect and renew it. The fish and wildlife who call these places home and deserve the best management we can provide. Yes, there are disagreements. Today it's coyotes, maybe tomorrow it'll be deer regulations or wolves. Those discussions will come, but at this point, there must be no disagreement. Natural resources management matters. It deserves a cost of living adjustment to avoid painful cuts in programs, staff reductions, catastrophic wildfires that we cannot contain, or dams that collapse due to deferred maintenance. This kind of stewardship used to be the hallmark of bipartisan leadership. We need that leadership again. We are grateful to Senators Bumstead and Cherry, to the MUCC, and to all the users that have stepped forward. These groups are asking for modest fee increases, not because they enjoy paying more money, but because they understand what's at stake. They are willing to contribute more to protect the resources that they love. We produce as many as 23 million fish a year, from walleye to muskie, for stocking across the state. This work happens in 6 facilities, all of which are in need of urgent infrastructure investment. We can't keep running them on baling wire. We need aerial firefighting capacity. The recent ice storm damaged 900,000 acres of forest. Pine treetops now litter the ground, dry fuel that is already a danger, adding to already a dangerous fire season. Add to that 1,000 miles of forest road still blocked. That's from here to South Carolina, forest roads that are blocked and need of clearing. That's not a snap of the fingers job. It takes manpower, it takes saws. Our foresters are already stretched thin with their daily responsibilities. So we make do for now, but without additional funding, it's not a question of if, but when we face a wildfire that we cannot contain or a dam that fails. The DNR is responsible for over 200 dams on state-managed public land. The average age is 62 years old. I'm 60. Things are breaking down. All right? Right now, there is zero funding appropriated by the legislature for removals or repairs of dams. These problems are foreseeable, preventable, and manageable. We are requesting $15 million annually to address the most urgent dam safety concerns and remove or repair the most dangerous structures. We're also requesting aerial fire suppression equipment. We need it. These are not partisan issues. They are real, physical, time-sensitive needs. Senators Bumstead and Cherry have given us a great start. If you agree, as all our user groups so far have, then stand with them. The very people who fight and pay the freight, hunt, are willing to shoulder a little bit more because they understand the value of what we're protecting. So please, now is the time. Now is the time to help. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, well said, appreciate that. We have presenting today Food Bank Council, Michigan Hunters Feeding Program, Phil Knight, CEO, and Marcia Kiefer, and Tom Weston.
All right, Brooke, which button do I push?
There's only one minute.
Good morning. My name is Tom Weston with DNR Marketing and Outreach. I'd like to thank the commission and the director for allowing me to have this opportunity to talk about a program that is near and dear to my heart. With me today is not Marcia Kiefer or Phil Knight, but Garrett Zuber of the Food Bank Council of Michigan. Garrett is our day-to-day person that helps us run this program. And if you don't mind, we'll go through a quick presentation and talk a little bit about what Hunters Feeding Michigan is all about. Thank you. So, I'll be straightforward, we'll talk right to it. The state of Michigan, hunger in Michigan. Over 1 million Michiganders are experiencing food insecurity in the state of Michigan. That's 1 in 7 children. The state budget office estimates the SNAP program will lose over $900 million in funding for benefits between 2027 and 2032. Those are just hard facts that we're dealing with that affects food insecurity in the state. That's 15% of Michiganders are food insecure. 15%. What is the Hunters Feeding Michigan program? It's straightforward. It's a program that lets hunters donate deer they harvested, and we provide venison to those in need. Very simple. We have a network of processors. We've got primarily 16 processors in southern Michigan that work in our program. The venison is challenged through the Food Bank Council of Michigan, providing pantries with high-quality protein for Michiganders throughout the state. Monetary donations are made by hunters, anglers, anyone buying a license, application, permit, ORV, snow. When they're buying a license from the DNR, they have an opportunity to make a donation to the program. So this is truly funded by hunters and anglers in Michigan. The history of our program is simple. In 2005, legislation was passed to start a wild game donation program. In 2007, that program was fully funded and operational. From 2007 to 2024, we had a contract with Michigan Sportsmen Against Hunger. We were mandated by law to bid this contract out, and they ran the program successfully for that time frame. Since 2024, our contract now is with the Food Bank Council of Michigan, who works in conjunction with Feeding America. Since 2007, over 2.8 million servings have been provided to those in need. And we track pounds of venison, but 1 pound of venison equates 4 servings, a quarter pound or hamburger. Now I'm going to let Garrett Zuber talk a little bit about the Food Bank Council of Michigan and Feeding America.
Yeah, so the Food Bank Council of Michigan was founded in 1984 as an anti-hunger organization, and we were created as a statewide strategic plan to attack hunger across the entire state. So we have 7 Feeding America food banks located in the state, with 1 in Grand Rapids, 1 in Battle Creek, 1 in Lansing, 2 in the Detroit area, 1 in Ann Arbor, and 1 in Flint. And these food banks work very hard to cover all 83 of Michigan counties, so that includes the Upper Peninsula. And our role is to work with Feeding America as direct partners to provide food to everyone we can. And that is where we work with over 2,000 agencies. Those are your food pantries, your shelters, your local churches, your soup kitchens, all those, etc., are our direct customers, or as we treat them as our partners. So the reason we were brought on is because we have a long-term goal to make this a statewide program. We have other programs to work with, like the local food purchasing agreement, where we have worked in every single county. So we know that we have the capability to deliver venison to every single county. And that's why our long-term goal is why we think we're the best vendor to cover the entire state.
Thank you. So some of the things we're doing is that any deer donated from a known CWD or bovine TB county Those will be disease tested prior to donation. If the animal comes back as detected, then venison will be discarded. What we started in 2023 when I took over the program is that all ground venison is x-rayed for metal contaminants, primarily lead. This venison is scanned at a USDA certified food inspection facility in Holland, Michigan, and that everything is scanned. We have a zero tolerance policy for any metal fragments, primarily lead, that goes into the venison. Give you an idea of where we're at. We've got 16 processors. We operate on a fiscal year, so this year we're roughly, right now we're at 120,000 pounds of venison. I've got I still have venison sitting out of processors freezers right now that we've not picked up. I'm hoping that hits 130,000 pounds by October 1st. That's 480,000 servings of venison. My goal for this program is, number one, it's funded by hunters and anglers, is that if we have the opportunity to have long-term appropriated funding for this program, my goal is to process 300,000 pounds of venison per year. I think the resource can handle that, specifically in key areas of southern Michigan. This is just one tool that can be used for donation. It's not the tool to manage the entire deer population. But if we're able to donate 300,000 pounds of venison each year, we will have an impact on food insecurity in Michigan. The director talked about reduction of hunters, loss of habitat, crop damage, car deer accidents. I mean, it's the opportunity, the venison is out there. And that is my goal, 300,000 plus a year, and have a sound funding model that we can run this program for the years to come. We're in the headlines. Detroit News, last August, Michigan Farm News, I know Andrew Bernice is here from Farm Bureau. Food banks are struggling to keep up with the demand. Farmers are complaining. I want to talk next about a program we started in 2023. I call it the trailer program. This year we had 6 refrigerated trailers. We were able to get a general fund appropriation. We bought 6 refrigerated trailers, and then we loan these trailers to farmers during the summer when they have deer damage permits. So we had trailers out this past summer from June 1st to August 31st. This is in partnership with Wildlife Division because we're working with those local wildlife biologists who work with the local farmers to actually schedule and move these trailers weekly. This past summer, we concentrated on the non-CWD counties. It's cheaper for me. I don't have to disease test those animals. So this summer, we brought in 1,100 deer. 1,001 deer donated this summer through the trailer program. Farmers reported shooting about 10,000 deer this summer on crop damage permits. I got 1,000 of those deer. There's a lot of venison out there. Those 1,000 deer turned into 35,000 pounds of ground venison. That equated to 140,000 individual servings for our customers that are out there. Support. We've got the National Deer Association here today. Mike Kettler, president of the National Deer Association, strongly supports this program to fight food insecurity for the state. Got a nice letter from one of our farmers in Grand Ledge, Michigan, Tim Skinner. We loaded him a trailer last year. He gave us about, I think, 31 deer. He gave us a nice donation, too. Wrote us a check right there on the farm for $1,000. We loved the program because we know where the venison was going. We called him up this summer and said, hey, want another trailer? He says, no. I took enough deer off my 1,200-acre property that I don't need to take any more deer. I can handle the rest through hunting season. Program goals, cost to get there, pretty straightforward. We pay $3 a pound per ground venison. That's roughly about 120 bucks a deer. That is a fair wage for our processors, is that they can keep folks employed throughout the season at $3 a pound. When the program started back in 2007, it was $1.75 a pound. Hard to keep folks employed at that rate. My cost to process the deer from a non-disease county, it's 140 bucks. About 120 bucks to process the deer, and then another $20 or so for x-ray. If I take a deer from a disease county, I'm paying the processor $20 to pull the lymph nodes. Those lymph nodes are then mailed into Michigan State University where they're tested. That cost me another $30, and on top of that I add x-ray for metal fragments, so it's about $190 a deer. My goal this year was 350,000 servings. That's what we set last October. I'm at 480,000 servings, so I'm pretty happy with that. Where I want to be, and where I want to be before I retire, is that I want a strongly funded program that we can provide 1.2 million annual servings. The money I need to do that is about $1 million a year. It's about $1 million a year. But we have an opportunity to address food insecurity in the state through venison donations. It's that simple. It's that simple. I believe in the program. It's a small program right now, just myself and Joe Pressgrove, who's on a needed vacation today. But we've got the opportunity. We've got farmers that are very happy to participate. We've got a lot of hunters that want to participate. They want more locations to drop off deer. Right now, I'd love to have processors in every county. I can't. I don't have the money to do that. I've got 16 processors getting a fair wage. More funding means more processors, more opportunities for hunters to drop off deer. How you can support it is pretty straightforward. You can donate directly through our Michigan.gov Hunters Feeding Michigan website. You can make a monetary donation when you're buying a license. Every retailer will see a pop-up when you buy a license that says, do you want to donate to Hunters Feeding Michigan? If you are not asked to make a donation, please ask the retailer and say, yes, I want to make a donation. Right now, 75% of my donations come from online purchases, because those customers will actually see that pop-up. Last year, we brought in $294,000 in donations. Right now, for this license year, I'm at $223,000. That'll spike up as we get closer to deer season and folks are buying their tags. And or you can donate directly to Food Bank Council of Michigan for a donation. All the money, 100% of the money goes towards processing. And that is my presentation. This program is very important to me. It gives us the opportunity to help people. And that's why we work, that's why I work for government, is to have the opportunity to help people. And anything we can do to promote this program and continue to increase the funding for this program is what is needed. So, be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions from the commission? John?
You mentioned the various locations of your facilities and that you cover the entire state of Michigan. Can you describe to us how logistics work so we get a better understanding of how you're able to satisfy the needs of northern, lower, and upper peninsula?
Sure. So we got multiple ways that we get food out to communities. The most efficient ways we call mobile distributions, where the food banks themselves go to like a parking lot or a church and they market where they're going to be and people can come get the food. Another practice that most of them do is these pantries, for instance, are members of the food banks and they can do an ordering system where they can go into a portal that they have and order off the warehouse inventory. And then they can pick up or can be delivered by the food banks in that way. So those are the two main ways we get food out. And then we also do direct agency pickups where a pantry can go to a business and maybe get like a food rescue from a grocery store, or for what we do for some of the non-toxic ammunition, they can go directly to the processor and then distribute it. So those are the kind of ways that we get the venison out in kind of a broad way.
Thank you.
And one thing that helped me with Food Bank Council is in the Feeding America trucks, you know, Eastern Michigan Food Bank, Greater Lansing Food Bank, West Michigan Food Bank, Gleaners, they come to the whole state. So we now have Feeding America trucks actually visiting our processors, picking up the venison, bringing it back to the centralized warehouses, whether it's Gleaners, Eastern Michigan, Greater Lansing, for distribution later. Last year, Joe Pressgrove moved 110,000 pounds himself with a loaned MDOT pickup truck and one reefer trailer. So having Food Bank Council as our partner has greatly increased how we distribute this venison across the whole state.
Other questions from the commission? Director,
So, Tom, can you just tell me, like, how much you've increased just on poundage from last year to this year?
So last year was about 110,000 pounds. This year, right now, as of today, we're at 120,000 pounds. It will increase as we get closer because I've got funding available left for early antler for the Liberty Hunt and for early antlers. I'm hoping to hit 130,000, 140,000 pounds for this fiscal year. But we've got to make it easy for hunters to donate and have more processing facilities across the state. It's that simple. But in order to have more processing facilities, we need more funding. And we're not the only program in Michigan. I mean, there's probably a dozen deer donation programs that are out there. Some are advertised, some are not. And that we've got a lot of folks doing a lot of good work out there. We're not the only one, but we've been out there since 2007. We plan to be out here for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Have a consistent program to really help address that. One person, 7 improvements.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is fisheries orders. Dr. Lucas Nathan and Associates.
Guilty as charged. Brought +1, hopefully that's okay.
Good morning. Again, my name is Lucas Nathan. I'm the Aquatic Species and Regulatory Affairs Unit Manager in our Fisheries Division. I'm here today with Chief Claremont to provide the second set of regulatory recommendations from Fisheries Divisions for this regulatory cycle. As a reminder, last month we had presented 6 different fisheries orders that are back today for action. Today we're presenting 6 additional fisheries orders for information. And these include a wide range of topics, including our warm water special regulations, 3 different fisheries orders focused on trout and inland and Great Lakes waters, underwater spearfishing as part of Fisheries Order 219, and finally fish disease control. Starting off with Fisheries Order 206, which is our special regulation for warm water species. This first set of recommendations is focused on 10 lakes in the Upper Peninsula, which you can see identified there by the yellow stars on the map in the bottom right corner. The issue here is not one that's limited to just these 10 lakes, nor is it limited to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, but really around the Upper Midwest, walleye have been observed to be on the decline. In particular, we've been noticing variable and declining recruitment in some lakes across the Upper Midwest. It's likely a combination of factors, warming waters that are less suitable for walleye, more suitable for other species, bass, other centarchids, or the pike that could have indirect or direct impacts on walleye, and also continued high levels of harvest, as walleye are obviously a very popular sport fish to harvest. And all these factors lead to concerns about the vulnerability of these populations moving forward. So our staff set out to develop a set of objectives to try to develop some recommendations for regulation to try to address this problem. First and foremost is to try to maintain and, if possible, increase natural recruitment and hopefully address that issue and make these populations more resilient moving forward. As part of this one, we don't have a lot of special regulations for walleye in the state. So learning about the effectiveness of the regulations to address these types of issues is also a high priority. So we set out to have an objective of maximizing our ability to learn via adaptive management, meaning we have a robust evaluation plan in place to evaluate the impact of these regulations so that we can learn, come back and provide additional recommendations as needed. Additionally, as part of this set of recommendations, maximizing public support was also a very high priority. That is the case with any new set of regulations, as it helps to not only make sure that our management strategies align with the interests of our anglers, but also increases compliance if we get buy-in and support for what we're trying to accomplish. And finally, our last objective for this set of recommendations was also to try to maximize size structure along the way. So by trying to achieve that objective of increasing natural recruitment, we also have the potential opportunity to increase the size structure of the population, which has short-term benefits to increasing fishing quality, as well as keeping an eye on those longer-term goals that we're trying to accomplish. So with all that in mind, our recommendations are to add a protected slot limit on these 10 lakes, which would mean no harvest from 18 to 23 inches. And this would be on top of the existing 15-inch minimum size limit that is our statewide regulation for walleye. As part of this, there'll also be a limit of only one fish over 23 inches. And looking forward, we have proposed a 12-year sunset for these recommendations, which would give us sufficient time to implement the regulation, have the desired effect, have the ability to go evaluate to see if that effect is being realized, and then come back with that data in hand and provide additional recommendations. As part of this process, I do want to just spend a little more time talking about how we went about selecting these lakes, because this was a fairly in-depth process and one that our staff has really been involved in really for about the last 2 years coming up with this recommendation. We had a set of criteria that we were looking for in these lakes. The first one obviously being that there's some level of natural recruitment happening in these water bodies. The list of lakes that you see is they have a variable level of recruitment. Some of them have very sustained levels of recruitment. Some are variable. Some are supplemented by stocking. And by selecting that diverse array of water bodies, it's going to increase our ability to understand how these regulations might do in these different systems. Additionally, we're picking lakes that had average to above average growth, which in general is just a characteristic that we typically like to see when implementing these types of effective slot limit type regulations. The ability to evaluate is very, very crucial. As I mentioned, this is a new set of regulations, and evaluating and learning is a high priority. We need to have some level of data in hand already on these water bodies, so we can have something to compare it to later on. Also have the capacity to go out and collect that additional data that we need. We can't be everywhere all the time. Obviously, we've heard a lot about our limited capacity that we currently have, so we need to make sure that it's feasible to get out and collect the data to evaluate these regulations. And then finally, having some level of recreational, cultural, or ecological importance, whether it's to our staff, to anglers, tribal agencies that we work with on this one, having some level of recognition that these water bodies are things that we're trying to protect and maintain for the future. So, obviously, that list of criteria is not limited to just these 10 water bodies that you see presented. We did go through a few iterations of these water body selections. I want to emphasize in that figure on the right, if you remember that from the last one, I mentioned that as part of our process, we get feedback from various stakeholder groups and update our recommendations as needed. That was really on display with this process. We went through a few iterations, getting feedback from local lake associations and various stakeholder groups, and revised this a few times to develop the final set of recommendations. I especially want to send an appreciation to the Upper Peninsula Sportsmen's Alliance, as they were heavily involved in selecting this final set of 10 that you see in front of you.
Question. How did you identify the problem existed in the first place?
You know, again, it's one that is not limited to these water bodies, so it's something that we've seen from researchers and management agencies across the upper Midwest for a number of years now. These water bodies in particular, some of them still have pretty sustained and consistent recruitment, and those are the ones that we're trying to keep it that way. The other ones, we have seen some declines, and some of the water bodies that are included have seen some declining numbers in terms of recruitment, and we evaluate that based on annual or as often as we can recruitment surveys that happen in the fall.
So there was then on these particular lakes and maybe others some sort of shocking program to identify age classes, what have you?
Correct. Yep. Those fall surveys around electrofishing around this time of year. Our staff are gearing up to do those surveys right around this time of year. So that's our primary assessment for looking at recruitment for fall.
Relative to the slot that you're proposing, has that been done in other places?
Yeah, there's variations on a theme. These specific ones, no, but certainly more restrictive regulations on walleye have been starting to be implemented across Wisconsin, Minnesota, other Midwest.
And what has Wisconsin and Minnesota recognized with a slot limit? Success, failure, doesn't matter.
Just generally speaking, protect slot limits.
Yes.
I mean, it's variable. But in general, protected slot limits have been effective not only for walleye but for other species as well. Northern pike is one that we use quite often. So in general, it's something that does have some social promise, but again, it's depending on the characteristics of the water body and specifics of those systems. So it's tough. We can't necessarily say that it's going to work everywhere, and that's part of this process is to see how it works in these specific lakes.
Do you have any concern as to what could be harvested based on the slot limit that you put on this? I.e., any angler that is fishing for walleye can only take between 15 and 17 inches.
In terms of just the restrictions
And,
on
and
harvest.
then that age class essentially is gone. Where do the 18 to 23 inches go if you're hitting a very small window, and that's what one can harvest from an angler? What type of concern might you have?
Yeah, it's certainly possible, and collecting creel information would be a component of this if we have the capacity. Our inland creel program is typically really impacted by our limited capacity, and if we have the ability to do so, we would have to supplement our field surveys with those creel type estimates to get a sense of if we're seeing shifting harvest levels into that slot. I'll note that what's unique about this set of regulations is we're leaving that 15-inch minimum size limit on, so it's providing even more protections than typical protected slot limits, which would allow any harvest below the slot. So we do have extra protections that otherwise would be afforded to populations.
It just concerns me greatly that an angler can harvest 15 to 17 inches for 12 years is what you're proposing. And for that 12-year time frame, those anglers are targeting walleye in that space, and that recruitment to get bigger gets incredibly minimized. I'm just wondering if there are other considerations if you had considered other considerations on a slot.
Yeah, can I add to that a little bit of detail? So if you look at the objective, what we're targeting is the idea that, especially for inland lakes, not the Great Lakes, but inland lakes, the stress is on walleye populations and their reproductive success. So as we've seen reproducing walleye decline, recruitment decline, the goal is to try to get fish into that 18 to 23 inch so that they can spawn once, twice, 3 times. If right now it's open harvest across the size ranges. So what your point is, we're focusing on smaller walleye, and that's true, smaller immature walleye. And once they reach that 18 inch, then they're going to be protected and they're going to be able to spawn. And the other solution to this would be to stock. We don't have the capacity to stock the lakes out of this recruitment problem. So the goal is to shift harvest so that once they mature, the walleye can spawn multiple times before they're vulnerable again.
If they could get there.
Yeah, and remember the other criteria that's really important, as Lucas mentioned, is good growth. If they were slow growing, then your point would be so valid in the sense that they wouldn't reach 18 inches. But these lakes actually have good growth, but poor recruitment. So they're going to get to 18 inches in a few years, then they'll be protected, mature, spawn. That's the idea. A lot of times when you look at Michigan fishing regulations, we've been pretty stagnant in our ability to actually try things like slot limits. Our anglers have asked for it, other states have used it. But slot limits are difficult, both in the design, what objectives you're trying to do, but also compliance. So working with UPSA, working with the stakeholders, looking at this idea that walleye recruitment in these inland lakes is going down, and we can't stock our way out of it. This is the best approach, but I would agree with you. We can't just set this regulation and walk away and say it's going to work. We're going to have to monitor it, we're going to have to be adaptive, and that's why there's a sunset. But even more importantly, before a 12-year sunset, we're hoping we can get data in 2, 3, 4 years to say, has the recruitment gone up? And because there are fish that are 16, 17 inches that could be harvested, but now under the slot will be protected and spawn. So that's the idea.
Well, and what occurs to me is my trips of 20 years to Canada, Ontario. They had the exact same slot at one time. It did not work because they were losing those fish that were of the age class younger than what the slot was. So in turn what they did was change how the slot occurred, where you could keep your fish 4 under 18 inches, 1 over 18, excuse me, 4 under or 3 under and 1 over, but it was a defined line, and that way recruitment continued to move through the system much more quickly and better, and not targeting a narrow window for anglers to be able to harvest.
Yeah, and I would just say, Lucas mentioned it pretty well, that a lot of iterations, both in the number of lakes, but also the design of the slot to try to increase that compliance. One of the proposals was to actually decrease the overall bag limit. So as your point would be, instead of taking, the number they can take now would be much lower, and that would relieve pressure on the harvest. That didn't generate as much political support and social support, so we're, again, it could be designed differently, and that is a possibility, but we're going to need to start somewhere, and this was the most accepted, best proposal on the table.
And I'd like to point out that there was a lot of interaction between user groups and the department on this, and a lot of fine tuning that's occurred, because I was in the earshot of all of that. And they seem to have reached an agreement on our approach.
I just see great concern. I'm just pointing it out.
I would just add one last point that Chief Brown already mentioned, that our, within our statewide walleye management plan, we did conduct a survey back in 2019 about restrictive regulations and what anglers would or would not be supportive of. And while in general there was support, about 75% of more restrictive regulations as needed to protect natural improvement, protecting slot limits were the second best option. So if we had to restrict them, that was the preferred option of our anglers.
And how will you measure success?
Two different forms, primarily, is that fall electric fishing survey I mentioned that will help us monitor recruitment, and then also supplementing that with adult population estimates. We'll do that within the next 10 years after that implementation. And as I mentioned, if possible, if capacity allows it, we'd love to also get out there and do some reel to assess what anglers are catching.
Thank you.
Other questions from commissioners?
Yeah, I have a quick question. With the slot limits, the limited capacity for enforcement, they're kind of working off an honor system. I believe that most outdoor individuals will be in compliance, but that also means there has to be an educational component to it, which is going to be key. So I'd like to hear just a little bit about that educational component. I imagine that's working with their stakeholders like UPSA and whatnot, but I am concerned about the very occasional angler that might only go out a couple times a year, have no clue about the slot limit. The regulations are complicated when you read through them. And I worry about that. And we always talk about trying to increase participation in just the negative impact that could make on somebody that might be just getting into angling, and it might just do it on a very occasional basis. So I just kind of would like to hear what your thoughts are regarding that.
Yeah, certainly that complexity piece and compliance is always the trade-off that we're thinking about. In this case, our outreach, our communications has really already started and has been going for 2 years now. So working with the local lake associations that are of central interest to these water bodies and all various groups that you mentioned and talked through. It's really already started, and additionally we've done already online public forums, other various public meetings, radio and TV coverage already, so it's already getting a lot of attention, and certainly pending decision and implementation, doing additional work with those same groups, with our own water resource and steering committee, get the word out, posting signage as needed. These water bodies are all ways that we could try to get that message out there and make sure that the anglers are aware, obviously beyond putting it in the guide.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Go
A
ahead.
few more words.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a late question. My apologies. I'm curious on the lake selection criteria. I'm just, in my mind, I'm wondering, were there other lakes that were considered including that, were close or didn't make the cut?
Yeah, and certainly as I mentioned, there's far more than 10 lakes that meet those criteria. And initially the selection we had was a little more centered in the clusters, in Iron County in particular. And one thing that kind of led to the final list was a little more distribution, so not individual anglers might not be as impacted, every one of their lakes might be hit in one area. So there certainly are others that are out there. We talked through a lot of them with different groups, with staff, and we have those that certainly could get added, and ones that are on our short list that if we're seeing some promise with these regulations, that we would certainly go back to those and reconsider adding those.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
All right. Next up, sticking with Fisheries Order 206. This one will focus on Northern Pike in Bass Lake in Kent County. This is sort of the inverse of the previous recommendation in that there has been a protected slot limit for Northern Pike on this lake for about 10 years. The issue is, though, that although there could be some benefits of increased growth. It doesn't quite seem to be having the benefits that we'd like to see with these types of special regulations. That can be observed here in this graph on the right. So to orient you on the bottom of the graph is age going left to right. On the left side is length from bottom to top. The black line represents our statewide averages for length of Northern Pike at given ages, with the vertical bars representing sort of the variation around those ages. The orange bar represents the survey from Bass Lake in 2024, and that grayed out bar across the graph that represents the protected slots, that would represent where fish cannot be harvested. And the issue you see here is that while fish seem to be growing around the statewide average up to that slot, they aren't making it out of the slot. This is likely something more habitat driven. We think that this lake just doesn't seem to support the trophy-sized pike. So what's effectively doing is limiting opportunities for anglers to harvest any fish once they get into that slot, and they'll never make it out of the slot and therefore be allowed to be harvested. And this is something we've heard from anglers that have some concerns that they don't have that opportunity anymore in this water body. So with the ever-present sort of trade-off of trying to protect resources and maximize opportunities, but also minimizing complexity when we can, given this one doesn't seem to be having the desired effect, we're proposing to remove that protected slot limit and replace it back with the statewide regulation, which is the 24-inch minimum size limit, 2-fish limit. And next, transition to sort of a series of trout-specific recommendations. The first one is on Fisheries Order 210, which is our designated trout stream order. We have 2 recommendations. First on Carpenter Creek in Otsego County, and the second on Wolf Creek in Alpena County. Really, the problem here is slightly different, but can be summarized by saying that we have regulations currently that are not aligned with our management goals for these 2 systems. Which whenever we have that can lead to confusion of our anglers, our staff, and law enforcement division as well. So, kind of a consistent theme you hear from me here is that our objectives are trying to balance opportunities, complexity, with protections as needed. So what we're recommending is for Carpenter Creek, adding it as a designated trout stream. This is one that's not currently designated, but a 2024 survey defined the model population of brook trout. So by adding it as a designated trout stream, it'll be managed under the Type 1 regulations, which are aligned with the typical trout fishing season and provide some additional protections for that wild population of brook trout. The second one, in Wolf Creek, this is a relatively minor recommendation. The downstream end of this designated area is a warmer water area, bass, rock bass, those types of species. And it's at that downstream end, there's a park that makes it really accessible for anglers, and there's been some recommendations or requests to modify that downstream boundary so we have the opportunity to target some of those other warm water species. So the extent of the change would just be 100 yards moving it upstream to avoid that warm water stretch that is really accessible for those other species from the park.
Any questions?
Can you tell me where Carpenter Creek is, Randy?
Carpenter Creek is the North Branch Los Alamos in the drainage.
Okay, and will that be a designated Type 1?
Correct.
I used to live there for a long time and I've never heard of it.
Yeah, and that happens. There's a lot of them out there, and this is one that.
I might have to go find it.
There you go. Yeah, it's on the map now. Next up, Fisheries Order 254, which is our inland lake trout order. I'll get into the next slide on the specific lakes here, but we have 8 in total, and really the same story. We have an issue here of our management goals not aligning with the regulations, which can be confusing. We're trying to really achieve all the same things that I mentioned in the previous slide. The recommendations here, which will all be proposed for immediate effect, pending decision. The first 4, Cedar Lake, Section 13, Bryan's Pond, and Swansky Pond. All 4 of these are lakes that historically have been stocked, but are no longer stocked due to habitat not being suitable for trout. So they haven't been stocked, and some of them as long as about 20 years, and we currently don't believe that any of these 4 water bodies support a trout fishery anymore. So we're recommending removing that designation. They would still be managed under statewide regs, but again, we don't believe there are trout fishery opportunities in these water bodies anymore. The second set all represent potential changes in the type regulations. So first is High Banks Lake, proposing to change it from A to B, with the main motivation being here that we've heard from anglers that there's a seemingly increasing abundance of panfish, and there's interest in targeting those panfish, in particular during the winter. So by changing from A to B would allow year-round fishing opportunities, allow ice fishing and use of all tackle, anglers so choose to target those panfish opportunities. The second set under that bottom, so Moon Lake, Strawberry Lake, and South Kidney, all recommending changing from D to A. All three of these are stocked with brook trout, and recent surveys have found that brook trout are not growing to the sizes that reach harvestable size, most likely just due to habitat not supporting and being conducive to this larger size fish. So all three of these recommending that change, which would increase the possession limit and reduce the minimum size limit, hopefully give anglers an opportunity to harvest some of those stock fish.
Can you remind us what that minimum size limit is and what the maximum bag limit is?
Sure, so currently in D, it's a possession limit of 1 with a size limit of 15, and then A would be possession limit 5 with no more than 3 over 15, and the minimum size limit of 10. Okay, last up for the trout-specific recommendations. This last one is Fisheries Order 253, which is our Great Lakes trout and salmon. This one focused on lake trout and 2 offshore reefs in Lake Superior, which Sand Rock and Big Reef can be identified in that upper right map in the shaded area. The issue here is just some concern. This highly valued fishery is becoming an increasingly popular destination fishery for catching some really big lake trout. And that increased popularity is starting to have some concern that there's potential for over-harvest of this fishery. So our objectives here are trying to protect this destination fishery while also trying to maximize as many angling opportunities as we can. And also when we can, we also are mindful of potential discrepancies with commercial harvest, and these 2 locations we recently specified in recent decree as areas excluded for commercial harvest. So our recommendations at this time would be to reduce the daily possession limit of lake trout and splake. As a reminder, there's a joint daily possession limit. Reduce that from 5 down to 2, but retain the 15-inch minimum size limit and only 1 fish over 34 inches. So again, this kind of strikes that balance of providing these protections while also giving the opportunities as we can.
Is Big Reef a different reef than Traverse Reef? Or is it the same?
Yeah, I believe they're different reefs, yeah. Oftentimes, I mean, I can't tell you that. Yeah, I believe they're different reefs. I can't tell you the spatial separation or what designates them, but oftentimes the reef are complexes and different humps get different names and shoals, so. But I think we have a presentation from Sean Sitar, the research biologist Marquette, that's worked extensively on that. He'll probably have a lot of detail to share in this discussion, so I'd be glad to take.
Today?
What's that?
Today? He's coming?
No, I can forward that after.
Follow up on that.
It would be helpful for me to know where I'm
Yep,
looking.
yeah, we can provide that.
Okay, great, thank you. When might you be able to do that, next week?
Yeah, I think he presented last year in prep of this regulation being proposed. So it's already in the NRC packet from last year, but I will track down the meeting is presented and make sure to get it to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
We should make sure all the commissioners get it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Fisheries Order 219, focused on underwater spearfishing. The current area of most relevance for this one as of now is the portions of Lake Michigan and Huron identified in the map on the right. The issue here is that we currently have a sunset in place on expanded opportunities that is set to expire at the end of this fishing season, so March 31st, 2026. For some quick background on underwater spearfishing, just as a reminder, sort of as a method, it's not new in the state. It has been allowed for targeting certain non-native fish in certain locations, but generally statewide for those species for a number of decades. It's only recently, as of 2022, that these expanded opportunities were provided. And those include opportunities for walleye, northern pike, and lake trout in those 2 areas identified in the map. Those regulations included some restrictions, including that the opportunity was limited to free diving only, so no food gear, other underwater breathing devices, anything like that. And also some restrictions on use of out-of-bounds flags and some other restrictions about not going in places that restrict boating traffic and some things like that. It also included a free license add-on, so the monitor would have the authority to issue license at additional cost. But with free license add-on, anyone that purchases a recreational fishing license would have the opportunity to also get this free license. It comes along with the requirement of doing monthly reporting, so we can track effort and harvest over this 3-year period. Last year, the Michigan Spearfishing Association providing an additional proposal, which included some expansions, different species, different locations. And last year, we had shared this with various citizen advisory committees and kind of worked it through our typical regulatory review process. We got a lot of diverse feedback. Enough diverse feedback that we didn't feel comfortable making a recommendation for expansion at that time. We proposed last year, and the NRC approved, extending 1 additional year for a total of 4 combined years, which will allow us time to complete our evaluation, get all that data that we were collecting from reporting, and initiate an evaluation as part of a working group with stakeholders and staff last year. So this one, given that process we went through, I do have a little more detail and kind of background of how we came up with our recommendation for this one, and I'll go through those details here in subsequent slides. For a brief overview of what we've learned by way of our harvest and effort reporting from 3 years. I'm only including those initial 3 years, so 2022, 2023, 2024, as we were still in the middle of the 2025 season. And when we initiated the evaluation working group, we used the 3 years of complete data to inform our evaluation. So over those 3 years, we've issued about 4,000 free licenses per year. And based on the effort reporting data, just under 200 fishers have reported going at least 1 trip during that year. Of those, about 60 per year reported more than 2 trips, so it gives you kind of a general idea of those that are getting this license, how often they're going out. What we have noticed over the 3 years is we're seeing decreasing amounts of effort, both in terms of the number of hours and the number of trips, identified by the figure there on the right. And although we're still in the middle of the 2025 season, that trend seems to have continued so far this year. In terms of harvest, just over 100 fishers have reported the harvest of at least 1 fish, with walleye by far being the most commonly reported species, totaling 400 or so fish per year. Most of those coming from Lake Huron, about 70%, the rest of them coming from Lake Michigan. Harvest overall was pretty skewed towards a small number of fishers, with the top 10 licensees harvesting about 70% of the walleye. For the other species, much lower amounts of harvest, with northern pike being 19 per year and lake trout 5 per year. From a program administration side of things, with any new reporting system and requirement of anglers, it does come with some challenges and some confusion. And this one was no exception. We had some confusion about what was required to report. The fishers need to report if they didn't go or if they didn't harvest anything. So it can result in just that confusion, which can reduce compliance and just in general increase the need to have that communication with the folks that are out there and having to do the reporting. It was a fairly high cost administratively. As the way we went about managing this program, we sent a lot of reminders, and if fishers responded back saying, well, I don't want the license anymore, we have to work with marketing outreach division to void the license to make sure that they were in compliance. So it did result in a fairly costly process just to make sure that we could try to manage this new system and make sure everyone was in compliance. It's hard to estimate exact numbers, but we ballpark around $10,000 per year just to manage the system alone. We have issued about 15,000 reminders per year, which we did feel like was a pretty critical part of this process. Just for example, at the beginning of this fishing season, the initial reporting only had about 20% compliance, so we had to issue those reminders to get people to respond and submit their reports. I mentioned the license voiding process. Over the 3 years, we voided about 1,100 or so licenses through that process. Again, as folks are responding to us saying they're no longer interested in the opportunity. Through those efforts, we still, we're short of 100% compliance, which is not terribly uncommon with some of these, but we estimate about 30% of the licensees have reported. We expect those might be the ones that maybe didn't go out and didn't use the opportunity, therefore maybe thought they didn't have to report, but this is a case where we only know what we know, and we don't, there's some uncertainties about that 30% and what level of effort or harvesting might be completed. Finally, just from the administration side of things, the social and user conflict aspect was a major talking point and has been and continues to be. In general, there have been very few reports submitted to the department about formal complaints about any kind of conflict or accidents or anything like that. And really up until a couple weeks ago, this really hadn't happened. We had gotten a few just in these last couple of weeks, in particular about some of the fishing opportunities and potential conflicts around some piers. But in general, those have been very few, and in general, very minimal over the 4 years.
Could you repeat the total number of participants?
The total number of participants, so we've issued about 4,000 licenses per year, but only of those, just under 200 have actually reported using the license and going out at least once.
Thank you.
So I mentioned we sought out to develop a working group and work through a process to evaluate regulatory options. We have completed that process. It began in January this year. We assembled a working group of 19 members consisting of representation at over 10 different organizations, including Fisheries Division, Law Enforcement Division, Department, as well as Michigan Spearfishing Association and various other angling groups, including MUCC, Trout Unlimited, Sportsman Alliance, and various other groups kind of representing a diverse array of interests. We sought out to kind of try to capture sort of the diversity of interests and geographies and perspectives on this one. So we developed the group and sent an invitation to try to capture that, try to get representation from Upper and Lower Peninsula and all these different groups. Noting though that we don't necessarily think this group necessarily reflects the relative kind of perspectives or the number of perspectives across the group. We try to capture kind of the diversity of them, not necessarily develop a group that represented the proportions of these perspectives across anglers. We used a really formal process. It's called structured decision making, which comes from sort of the broader field of decision science to help us navigate this process. I won't go into all the details of what structured decision making is, but just in a general way, some of the benefits of this approach and why we chose to use it for this instance. First is that it's a stepwise process that helps us navigate and discuss complex decisions. You can see from that figure there, it is a very formal process of walking through and talking about individual aspects of the decision, and I'll talk through those pieces of this one as I move forward. Another one of the benefits is that it helps us to distinguish and incorporate both biological data and human values. We know that both of those pieces are present in every single natural resources and fisheries management decision-making process that we have. For instance, in biological data, we collect fishery surveys, tell us about fish communities and how they're growing and their age structure. The human value piece tells us what anglers want to target. They want to target bass, walleye, they want to catch and keep fish, they want to do catch and release. Those are all human values that we have to incorporate into fisheries management decision-making. So this process is really helpful for not only making sure that we incorporate both of those pieces, but distinguishing one from the other, as those two things can be complex in the relationships. And finally, this process is really helpful for identifying uncertainties, the things that we do and do not know, which can help us identify research priorities, which can then inform decision-making in the future. So with that, we set out to develop or work through this structured decision-making process with the overarching goal of evaluating regulatory options for underwater spearfishing while considering all the trade-offs associated with angler opportunities, safety consideration, biological impacts. And the thing I want to underscore here that we emphasize as we develop this working group is that our intent was to evaluate with this diverse group of stakeholders and not necessarily come up to a single consensus option from the group. recognizing this one has generated very diverse perspectives and diverse opinions from different user groups. So we set out to hear those different perspectives and use that to ultimately inform Fisheries Division's recommendation. But as you see here, we did not necessarily come up with a single consensus option for the working group. So the first step in these processes is to identify objectives. It's the things that we care about. We came up with 4 main ones identified in bold text here. So ensure protection of aquatic resources, create, maintain, and enhance fishing opportunities, maximizing public support, and minimizing regulatory complexity. Those should sound familiar. The things you hear me talk about all the time and reference in just about every regulatory decision-making process that we have. To add some more specifics behind those objectives related to this specific decision, the working group identified a number of sub-objectives. So under that first one, we have maintaining species-specific harvest rates, minimizing significant increases in total fishing mortality, and minimizing the disproportionate impact on large fish. And the group identified the opportunity to do those relative to hook and line anyway. The next set of objectives was to increase statewide accessibility of underwater spearfishing, and increasing the harvest opportunities of desirable table fare for underwater spearfishing. These are things that we've heard from the Michigan Spearfishing Association that is of great interest to them for the last several years. And then finally, underneath public support, we have a few different ways to assess that, including minimizing user conflict over access or space, minimizing safety risks, and maximizing the support of licensed anglers. So I'll talk more about how we proceeded using these different objectives, but I'll note, right now that the initial step of the process is just to identify the things that we do care about and define the objectives, recognizing that individuals and different organizations might prioritize these different objectives differently. So we might care about certain things more than the others, and we'll get to that in subsequent steps of this process. So the actual evaluation that we completed, the working group came up with 9 different regulatory options. And I won't go into all of them in great detail, but the idea here was to cover a really diverse set and a really broad range of potential opportunities. And the working group certainly accomplished that. The 9 that they came up with included elimination of the game fish opportunities, so allowing the current opportunities to sunset, retaining status quo opportunities of those 3 species in the 2 lakes, and then 7 different variations of expansions, which included the same 3 species across a broader range, included of additional species. We had some regulatory options that included inland waters in addition to Great Lakes, and all sorts of different variations trying to meet those different objectives that we laid out. The analysis that we did, we used a process called expert elicitation, which is essentially asking folks to predict how well they think the different regulatory options would or wouldn't meet all different objectives. And we do that by using specific metrics to associate those different objectives. And it is a fairly time-intensive process, so if I haven't said it already, I'll take a moment to appreciate and send my thanks to not only staff, but all working group members that participate in this one, because it is a fairly time-intensive process to go through these evaluations. After that evaluation, we also asked them to prioritize the objectives, which things do you care about the most, if you have to have some trade-offs, which ones would you prefer to have. And that then all can be compiled into a final set of analysis, which identifies which options are most supported. This was completed by all 19 members of the working group, as well as every Fisheries Division biologist and manager across the state. And for the analysis, we clustered them into a few different groups, recognizing there's going to be some likely differences across the group. So there's 3 groups of Fisheries Division staff, working group members that have spearfishing experience, or spearfishers, and the working group members that do not have spearfishing experience, non-spearfishers. And with all that said, I'm going to show you here the very complex graph, so I'm sort of easing into it here. On the left-hand side, you see all the different options that we evaluated. Don't worry about reading each individual one. There's a lot up there, and I'll kind of walk through the high-level takeaways here. But in general, they're organized from the most restrictive at the top, being elimination of current opportunities, to the most expansive at the bottom, which includes all species, all water statewide, with some exceptions. Across the top of this graph, you'll see 3 different columns representing those 2 different groups that I mentioned, Fisheries Division, non-spearfishers, and spearfishers. And the color coding that you're about to see is sort of assigned with all those different objectives. So the blue colors represent aquatic resource protection, the reddish colors represent public support, the greenish colors represent opportunities, and the purple represent complexity. So I promised a complex graph, and here it is. This demonstrates where the top supported options were for these different groups and the whys behind them. And again, don't worry about getting into all the details. I'll highlight a few high-level takeaways and then also have some details and interpretations of the next graph. I want to first draw your attention to these first two columns, which represent the responses from Fisheries Division and non-spearfishing members of the working group. In general, the preferred options were the more restrictive ones, which, based on this analysis, the top supported one was the elimination of current opportunities. Again, those colors represents the why. You can see a lot of blues and reds. That indicates that the primary concerns from these groups were potential impacts on aquatic resources and potential concerns about public support. In contrast, we see that this third column represents the working group members with spearfishing experience. You can see here the preference was those options that include more expansive opportunities, with the green colors representing the priority placed on providing those opportunities. So that's just sort of the high-level takeaway, and I'll come back to this graph as needed. But diving into some of the details, really the strengths of these processes is to allow us to talk about the things we disagreed on. And what the working group came up with was three key areas of disagreement. The first one was the perception of licensed angler support. And this can be summarized by the graph here on the right. And so these represent individual estimates from these different groups of how supportive do they think 1.2+ million anglers would feel about these regulatory options. On the left, we have the status quo options, and on the right represents one of our expanded opportunities, which most closely matches the proposal we heard from the Michigan Spearfishing Association last month. The three colors represent those three different groups. So two major takeaways about this idea of public support. First was sort of a contrast among the groups. So we first focused on the green and the orange, Fisheries Division and non-spearfishers, respectively. From left to right, you see a decrease in those estimates, meaning that those groups predicted a decrease in public support, down as low as 50 to as low as 25% public support for that expanded opportunity. And that's in contrast to the blue color, which represents spearfishers, which predicted an increase in public support, jumping from about 25% up to just shy of 75%. Yep.
How would one know or assume what other people think?
Yeah, so it's, we don't know. And that's
So it's their own gut feeling.
kind of the point of this process is to use that.
That's scary science.
Well, if I could jump in, and, you know, Lucas is the expert on structured decision-making, but I want to reiterate a couple points he made. Number one, all management biologists, all 25 of them, were represented by that green bar. As an expert in this process, they are the experts that talk to thousands of anglers, hear every complaint, every issue. So when we say, well, how are they going to know what people think? That is the front line of management, fisheries management in Michigan, and they hear from more anglers than anyone. And so to say, well, we don't know, is maybe a mischaracterization, just because they do hear input. They talk to anglers, they talk to bait shops, they talk to charter boat captains. They're the front line in the communications. I know there's uncertainty. I'm not disagreeing with that. I know it's hard to predict what people value. What they value today might change tomorrow. But I put a lot of weight in our staff and our management biologists, because they are so in tune with the anglers and the angling community. And I hope you'd agree with that.
How many anglers are in the state of Michigan?
1.2
By a license.
Yeah, 1.2 million.
In a given year, how many anglers do your staff speak with?
Yeah, so if you just look at the management unit structure, even within each management unit, as you all know, in the Great Lakes, we have creel clerks. So creel clerks talk to approximately 40,000 anglers a year. But you're right, a management biologist is not going to be able to talk to a million people. But what they do is they have contacts, again, with tackle shops, with representatives. So when they hear something And again, the regulatory process is based on them hearing issues about a lake or water body or species, and they're hearing it from multiple sources or people who talk to a lot of anglers in their community and their facet. So again, I would say we rely on their voice because they represent within their area, the management area, the anglers, the angler community, and they typically have the pulse on what's happening.
Of the 40,000 they speak with, I'm not going to assume anything. However, I would guarantee there are a minuscule amount of those 40,000 that even though spearfishing is occurring in Michigan, whether it be fish that are table fare and game fish or just simply sporting. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't mean to really, just make one comment, turn it back to Lucas, but you're absolutely right. Awareness of the overall opportunity by average anglers is definitely something we hear from management partners. But also, when new opportunities like this are vetted, oftentimes it takes a large campaign to bring that awareness to a higher level before a change should be made, which will tie into recommendations.
And when you're asking the spearfishing group that you've assembled, ones that don't agree with spearfishing and ones that do, there is a clear bias one way or the other, and they're not the experts either. That's all I'm pointing out.
Yeah, and I think on that, there was complete consensus in the group. And I think at this time, the summary would be that we are uncertain about the level of support, regardless of positive or negative, and that is something that there was consistency. So, going back to this graph on the right, you see these three different groups, green, orange, and blue. That represents how these different groups estimate public support, and what you can see from all three of them, they basically span 0 to 100%. Meaning that regardless of if you're fisheries division staff, spearfisher, or non-spearfisher, there's a lot of uncertainty. So it suggests exactly what you're saying, is that we are limited in our knowledge currently, and that is something that was one of the main takeaways from this process, is that we currently have a lot of uncertainties about the level of public support.
Thank you.
The second sort of key area of disagreement that we summarized was the prioritization of opportunities. So I referenced that we need to prioritize those different objectives. And there was a very large difference between some of the working group members, where spearfishers put about 50% of the weight, the importance on providing those opportunities, whereas the non-spearfishers, fisheries division staff tend to be much lower, and there was a lot of variation, but on average tend to be only 10% range of priority. The reasons for those low prioritizations were a bit diverse, and I'd summarize two things that the working group tend to talk about the most. The first being that overall, relative to our entire angling population, this opportunity has been utilized by a very small percentage overall, so a pretty low participation relative to our 1.2 million anglers. So that's something that our working group members identified and spoke concern about, that thinking about prioritization of limited capacity in department and division, this one some felt was not a high priority. Additionally, we heard some concerns about fair chase and ethical take. This is a difficult concept. It's inherently a values-based definition, so it's not something that we define as a working group. But I did hear from some working group members that they felt that underwater spearfishing, because it doesn't involve the take or the lure from the fish, that it is equivalent to snagging. And that's something that the concern is that we don't know what percentage of our anglers feel that way. So I think it kind of comes back to that idea of uncertainty about public support. But both of those issues seem to contribute to the concept of low prioritization as the opportunity.
What is the division's opinion on fair chase or comparing it to snagging?
I would say this time we have not necessarily asked that question of all of our staff, of whether or not it is or is not. Again, it's a challenging thing to define, but we have obviously provided recommendations in the past, and therefore see it as an opportunity that.
I'll take the liberty to speak on behalf of the division here. I would definitely say it's from the biological standpoint, as long as the regulations are in effect, typically the method of take doesn't have the biological impacts. We can do that throughout the regulations. So when you look at the method of take, and it becomes this value statement. We already allow underwater spearfishing for a variety of species. So that's number one position for the agency, right? So if we had issues from the fair chase standpoint, we might have not taken that position, not allowed underwater spearfishing for freshwater drum or buffalo or other species. The question really becomes with game fish. And with game fish, it becomes difficult, and I'll give you an example. Game fish is funded by fishing license dollars. So number one, it's a free license. Number two, the gear that's used is not contributing to Dingo Johnson. A fishing pole is, but the wetsuit is not. So there's an argument that when you take a look at game fish or sport fishes, the recreational anglers feel they have contributed and paid for the management. Therefore, if you allocate it to another gear or another facet of the fishery, we get this lot. Then it starts to encroach on what they believe is not only fair chase, but also an unequitable allocation of a resource that they paid to manage. So that's the considerations that we have.
And to counter that a little bit, just so we're all clear, the sport angler or spear angler must buy a fishing license. No, must buy a fishing license. The spear fishing license is free as an add-on, but they are required to buy a fishing license.
That's correct.
So they are contributing. And I know these guys, this is not the only method in which they go fishing. They're also buying other tackles in the sport shop. So they are contributing in a different capacity. I want to make sure that it's totally clear, because this is not their only method of they're using.
The point's valid. If the cost of management was zero, then it would be, as you said, it's just within the cost of a regular fishing license, and the management equation, the cost doesn't change. But as Lucas mentioned, there is a cost, and with every new opportunity, as the director mentioned, these new opportunities come with an increased cost and responsibility on the agency to manage, and then those costs do or should be compensated with a license or some other structure to pay for, otherwise they spread us thinner.
And as we all know, we have no say in the matter of licensing and license fees. So that's not a commission decision.
And the last point for this slide, I wanted to touch on this, a not so small one, but just to summarize sort of the potential impacts for aquatic resources and then concerns about conflicts and accidents. In general, I'd say the discussions within the working group identified this, and there was consensus around currently those are low, based on low levels of harvest, minimal conflicts reported, but we did see a lot of uncertainty about expansion. So depending on the extent of expansion, we saw greater and greater uncertainties, and quantified that through this process. And there were different levels of perception about those uncertainties and the direction based on those groups. So there was some inconsistencies about sort of how different groups perceive the potential impacts if expansion were to occur. Additionally, I would summarize that there was some different perspectives on the value of the data we have in hand. While I heard some summarize it by saying, well, we have a really good handle on it, there's a low level of participants, there's a low level of harvest, therefore we should feel really good about expansions. On the same hand, or on the other hand, I guess others said, well, that's 3 species and 3 locations, and these impacts could be really specific to certain species, certain locations, certain times of year. It doesn't necessarily say we know everything about the potential impacts moving forward. So those 3 main areas is what I would summarize as sort of key areas of disagreement among the working group. So to transition into Fisheries Division's recommendation, summarize our analysis by again highlighting what we already talked about, is that there is a large amount of uncertainty about public support. Chief Claremont summarized that certainly we talked to a lot of anglers in the division, but we still have a lot of uncertainties about how the broader angling group might feel about these opportunities. The biological impacts and user conflicts do seem limited to date, but again emphasizing that those could be variable depending on the species, location that might be included in any potential expansions. At this time, as we talked about, it is a difficult thing to prioritize, and the new opportunity comes with an increased demand of monitoring, evaluation, additional conversations, not only internally, but with our stakeholders. And that's something that's very difficult right now, given all the capacity constraints that we've heard about and talked about over the last year in particular. And then finally, sort of the flip side of all those things, we also recognize that, that uncertainty about public support also makes it difficult to justify removing current opportunities. So retaining those current opportunities does seem to be an acceptable trade-off, given the current amount of effort and harvest that we have observed over the last 4 years. And that's something that I've heard not only from fisheries division staff, but some of the mountain fishing working group members as well. So with all that said, our recommendations are to remove the sunset on the current opportunities and allow those to continue. And should no changes occur, our recommendation is to remove that monthly reporting requirement because we have a good sense of the amount of effort and harvest that's taking place given the current opportunities. So if those opportunities remain with no changes, we feel comfortable removing that reporting requirement moving forward. And then finally, not only with this one, but really with all regulatory options, we remain open to discussions for modifications in the future. With this one in particular, acknowledging that I think the biggest thing that would influence the division's position on this one would be to address that uncertainty related to public support. And while we have started some of those conversations with a few researchers to see if we can get a better handle on the broader perspectives on this one, that is going to require some external capacity to help us improve our capacity to answer those types of questions.
First of all, I'd like to thank you guys for going through that process. It was a long, tedious process. It shows. And I appreciate you bringing forward your recommendations. I don't think it's a secret, so I'll at least address it that we are working on an amendment to what you're proposing. It's not complete yet, but when it is, I will certainly share it with Chief Claremont and others so that we can have good dialogue and language moving forward with any amendment.
One more. This one's much shorter, but I promise. Last one is for director's order, focus on fish health, fish disease control. Statewide implication of this one of the issues at hand is that we have currently within this order a set of restrictions and requirements that help us not only monitor for, but prevent the potential impact of fish disease across the state. And it currently is set to expire at the end of this fishing season, so we're in place when you need to revisit this one. And obviously, we're always thinking about the trade-off with fish disease as it relates to minimizing risks of fish diseases, but also minimizing the burden on anglers and industry as that typically comes as a direct trade-off. In this case, we feel like the current requirements that are in place, in particular for things like VHS that require testing of bait that's being harvested in the state or brought in from out of state, still serve a very important role in our prevention of the spread of fish diseases. And as we know with a lot of these diseases, sometimes they do not have the ability to control them or address them once they're introduced, so our primary objective is to prevent them from being spread and introduced into new water bodies. So for that reason, we're recommending to just renew the fish health testing requirements for bait fish and other fish that are imported into the state and harvested in the state to remain in place so that we have those protections moving forward.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is a presentation on wetland habitat from Callie Rush and Dr. Randy Knappich. And Dr. Knappich, did I pronounce that right?
Correct.
Thank you. Oh, wait a minute. We have a third.
I'm just doing the
Grab my
introduction.
chair.
Hello, Commissioners. Commission had asked Wildlife Division to learn more about what habitat management activities are going on for wildlife habitat in Michigan. And so we're starting a new segment today. It's going to be for the next 9 months, we're going to be introducing wildlife habitat projects information, one a month for the commission. So today starts out a 9-month segment. And so today's segment, well, with all these segments, we're going to be talking about what staff are doing as well as what we're doing in partnership with other partners. And so today's segment is on wetland habitat. So today, we have two members of our wetland team here. We have Dr. Randy Knappick and Callie Rush. So Randy has been with us for about 6 years, right after he graduated with his PhD from MSU, and he is our wetland habitat specialist. And then Callie is here. She's been here a little less than a month. She came to us from Ducks Unlimited, and we're happy to have her aboard. And she is our waterfall specialist, and so I'll hand the presentation over to them.
Make sure I understand how the slides work, how to advance.
Green button.
The green button, easy enough. So good morning, commissioners and chairman. Really appreciate the opportunity here today to talk about what Wildlife Division is doing for partners, or with partners for wetland conservation here in the state of Michigan. And for the people that live here in the natural systems and wildlife, which we all enjoy. So as Chief Thompson mentioned, my name is Randy Knappick. I am one of the statewide wetland habitat specialists and working with partners to restore, manage, and enhance wetlands. Since starting in that role as a statewide wetland habitat specialist in 2019. And I'll let Callie Rush introduce herself, and then I'll start off the presentation.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Commissioners. As Chief Thompson and Randy mentioned, I'm Callie Rush, and I was recently hired as the statewide waterfowl specialist with Wildlife Division. I'm new to this role, but I'm not new to the arena of wetland conservation in the Great Lakes region, as I was previously at Ducks Unlimited for 6.5 years here in Michigan. Prior to being hired by Wildlife Division, I worked alongside many state, federal, local agencies, non-governmental organizations, some tribes, and many private partners to catalyze wetland conservation for waterfowl, water birds, and outdoor recreationists that spend hours afield in waders and muckloops.
Yeah, thank you, Callie. I wanted to start off here, and when we say wetland conservation, really being very clear what we mean when we say that. And we mean specific actions that we take on areas of altered and degraded wetlands, former wetland areas, or in those areas of high-quality wetlands to really achieve specific management goals. These actions are in lockstep with the DNR's mission. We do this because Michigan as a state has lost more than 50% of its wetlands, and in some areas of southern Michigan, we've posted a wetland loss of 90%. And additionally, many of the wetlands that do remain in the state are in an altered and degraded status. But as we'll discuss today, that those wetlands need not be lost, nor their function across the landscape. One path for wetland conservation are protecting those areas that remain high quality. Keeping high-quality areas in that condition remains the most cost-effective and ecologically efficient way for conservation. Protection can arise through fee simple acquisition or using tools like a wetland conservation easement, where you buy a subset of rights on that parcel. Or in some cases, we use both of those mechanisms on the adjacent contributing uplands, because those uplands have an undue and outsized influence on the function of that wetland itself, through runoff, through nutrient contributions, or really invasive species pathways. Generally, land protection through Wildlife Division occurs through the fee simple acquisition. In many areas of the state, we focus on, and especially in the southern part of Michigan, we focus on acquiring existing altered and degraded wetlands or restorable former wetland areas with a plan to restore their function on the landscape. Acquisitions related to these, specifically for DNR Wildlife Division, align with our public land strategies that prioritize parcels within our existing land acquisition boundaries, those that essentially unlock management options like flooding or prescribed burning, those that dissolve in holdings within our current ownership, protect coastal wetlands, or in some areas expand or establish publicly accessible land where it is in limited supply given the population. A second arm of wetland conservation relates to the slide that we see here right now. And it's our second best or sometimes only option in the case of southern Michigan, and that is to increase the function of existing altered and degraded wetlands through wetland restoration projects and enhancement. Many areas in Michigan have experienced such hydrological alterations that they're not even wetland anymore, not even considered wetland anymore. But importantly, they could be, if those alterations, the subsurface drainage tiles and ditches were disabled, it would return to wetlands immediately, and that function would return as well. For us in Wildlife Division, this occurs on lands that we already hold and manage, or on lands that were recently acquired for that specific purpose. Much of what is managed by DNR, again, especially in southern Michigan, carries with it the relics of its former land uses. So whether that's through agriculture, residential development, or even just certain homesteads, those relics of that land are still evident on the landscape when we manage it. Wildlife Division works with partners to restore the hydrology to those areas as best as possible, given neighboring parcels and sometimes the existing drainage infrastructure that must remain for neighbors to be able to have the land use on their parcels. In some contexts, for a wetland restoration project, our actions are to simply return hydrology to that parcel. In others, we're doing work to restore a specific function back on the landscape. In some areas, restoring the hydrology back to its pre-alter condition will not actually restore the function of that wetland, and that's in the case of the wetlands that are dominated by invasive plant species or have outsized influence from those contributing upland areas through developmental pressures or otherwise. In those cases, we'll lean on more of a wetland enhancement type project to really restore the function of that wetland back on the landscape. It's important to note that all of these projects do have an immediate functional lift for wildlife, for hunters, for anglers, for trappers, and for outdoor recreationists in general in Michigan. When I talk about increasing the ability for a wetland to function, we really see an increasing output of those services that are provided as well. When I say services provided, I mean those things like floodwater retention, nutrient capture and retention, breeding habitat for secretive marsh birds, waterfowl, water birds, as well as that recreational opportunity for those hunters, birders, and trappers. Those services do really extend to items that are tangible for humans as well. These areas are used by those user groups that I just mentioned, as well as kayak groups, communities, and school groups for green space, a nature-based classroom, and really areas to unwind and experience nature. And while those core purposes for those different groups or may be different between those groups or using a restored or protected wetland, they're all fostering an appreciation of that wetland and its value on the landscape just the same when they use them. Historically, many of our wetland restoration projects were hyper-focused on breeding habitat or migratory habitat for waterfowl, or in some cases, water birds. That was rightly so, given the pressures and the things that we were experiencing at the time and the loss of those habitat features in the landscape. Again, the more than 50%, the more than 90% wetland loss in certain areas. While those projects were done for waterfowl or water birds, those other ecosystem services like flood retention and nutrient capture were being provided. But now, many of our wetland projects, by design rather than happenstance, incorporate specific design elements to make sure that we can maximize nutrient capture and retention, flood water storage where possible, all alongside those values for waterfowl, for wildlife, for those recreational users out there on the landscape. This was very evident in our Shiawassee River State Game Area, where we had a lot of past and contemporary management projects out there. Very evident there at Shiawassee River State Game Area and the National Wildlife Refuge in 2020 with the catastrophic dam failures in the Shiawassee River corridor. Some of those areas of the federal, the National Wildlife Refuge, and our side were under more than 10 feet of water, captured that flood water from going downstream immediately to the communities. And those are also heavily utilized areas for outdoor recreation as well. Another is the ongoing interagency effort in the Western Lake Erie Basin watershed, where there are wetland restoration projects specifically for nutrient capture and trying to improve water quality in Lake Erie. Those projects by design are for nutrient capture, but also through Michigan DNR's involvement are trying to make sure that those projects can be beneficial to wildlife and for outdoor recreation where possible. As I've alluded to a couple times today, leaning on different areas and different partnerships, and Callie is going to hammer home here in the next several slides, is that we, Wildlife Division, could not have done what we've achieved for waterfowl, water birds, hunters, trappers, and anglers, and really the citizens and people that live in the state of Michigan more broadly, without the involvement and the dedication of our partners. We've relied heavily for the past several decades on groups like Ducks Unlimited, to help us form partnerships and to carry an administrative burden at times for external funding sources. We've relied on DEU and agencies like the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, to leverage their expertise in trying to get wetlands back on the landscape here in the state. We've also worked very closely with many of our organizations and groups that care deeply about our public lands, and specifically our managed waterfowl hunt areas, where historically a lot of these projects have taken place. We've leveraged their capacity, their knowledge, their expertise on certain restoration techniques, but most importantly, their funding to really turn shovels to sign deeds and to ensure that wetlands remain on the landscape for the people of Michigan and the wildlife and natural resources that we depend on. And that said, in line with kind of what I mentioned regarding wetland services, I am going to pass it off to Callie Rush here in a second to talk about some of the expanded partnerships that we have, doing some of the expanded work related to water quality and such. But if there is a question.
I have one particular focus. I have the pleasure of living in a wild area, but I've noticed that a lot of wetlands in my area is being overrun by invasive plant species. I was out this week and I mean acres and acres of buckthorn. What's being done? What can be done? Is that an issue? You just work around it?
Yeah. And so I'll touch on this a little bit, and we can have some follow-up after if we need. But as I mentioned early on, many of our existing wetlands that remain on the landscape are in an alternate integrated status. And sometimes they are in that alternate integrated status or dominated by invasive plant species because there are some hydrological alterations to that, allowing those invasive species to take hold and stay. So in some cases, we can restore the hydrology of that wetland, or a person could on their property through programs held by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And in some cases, just getting that hydrology back to the wetland may not allow, say, buckthorn to remain in that wetland, and those native plants can come back in. In some cases, that's not possible, and just returning the hydrology doesn't work. So there are other opportunities working with partners in some of the different federal funding options, some of the assistance here in Wildlife Division, as well as some of the different local groups, the cooperative invasive species management areas of groups of partners working together, really trying to tackle those invasive plant species issues more broad. So there's a few options, but wetland restoration and restoring the hydrology very well could be the thing that does cause those invasive plant species to essentially die and let native plants back in.
Thank you.
Can I add something real quick? Just, I think it's worth noting that most of the department's invasive species money comes from general fund. That's one of the bits of general fund that we use. The need far expands the funding that we have. So there's definitely opportunity to increase the work and increase our partnerships for invasive control and management through additional funding. And that general fund money that we receive for invasives, that's very, very important money. It's distributed all across the state for invasive species projects. So just couldn't pass that up.
Would you come up? That really, excuse us, just a second. Yeah, that is my next question. Funding, costs, etc., in regard to wetland maintenance and improvement.
Maybe include federal funding that's also.
Yeah, right. Good, Joe. This is partnering is another issue that I wanted to talk about. How you can leverage that money.
Yeah, so just to restate that in DNR, most of our invasive species money comes from state general fund. And it's used, it's distributed across the state through partnerships. You know, Randy mentioned SISMAs. These are local organizations that identify and prioritize invasive species projects in their communities to get that work done. And we issue that out through grants with our team. So critical funding, there's way more work that needs to be done than we have funding for. So we could certainly use and leverage additional funding for invasive species work across the state for wetland restoration.
In the general cost of that sort of thing per year, would you estimate?
Yeah, this is off the top of my head. We'd have to double check, but I think it's about $5 million a year that goes towards our invasive species programs across the division. Maybe others in the room could correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the approximate amount.
And the need far exceeds that amount in order to have the impact that we would love to have.
Is there an estimate on what they need? I mean, it's really,
What would you like?
Yeah, we could easily spend and get projects done for 3-4 times that amount. Buckthorn was mentioned. Buckthorn is very expensive to control. It takes multiple treatments over multiple years to knock it back. And so these often are not one and done kind of jobs. They take an investment.
Am I mistaken in my belief that buckthorn particularly is bad for upland birds and migratory birds because of the seeds and the seed, not only dispersing the seeds, but the seeds are very toxic in an example.
Yeah, and so there are plant species just like that, where even like some of the upland invasives, like neighbor honeysuckle is similar, and like birds will eat those seeds, toxic or not. They don't provide the nutritional value, serves as that really easy seed dispersal mechanism. So yeah, in general, those seeds, that is their dispersal mechanism, so it's very bad for invasive species spread, and oftentimes is not providing that nutritional value for wildlife that they need on their migratory paths. Yeah.
Just an observation, I've noticed that there are fewer rough grouse in areas where I've seen buckthorn take over.
Keith, thanks for bringing up that general fund thing. I just wanted to point out, 85% of our funding comes from user fees. Fishermen, hunters pay for almost all of what we do. $85 million total in general fund allocation, a lot of it to LED, which is less than Western Michigan University. So the DNR and all its divisions gets less general fund contributions than Western Michigan University gets in general fund contributions. You pay for what you value. So,
yeah, that's a great segue. And Callie's going to talk about some of the different funding opportunities with different partners and how we use and leverage some of those funds to accomplish a few different projects that she'll highlight here today. But before she does, and she'll have to reiterate this point as we go forward, but just that point, that much of the work that you'll see and that I talked about and Callie will talk about is done through partnerships and external funding. And state funds are a part, but it's done through external funding most times.
Yeah. Thank you, Randy, and thanks, Keith. Let's see, change the slide. So as we've been talking about, and we'll get more to management and maintenance later, but we could not do what we do without partners. That last slide showed partners that the DNR has worked with for decades. But at the same time, there's more organizations, communities, local units of government, and private landowners that are also interested in conservation and restoration of wetlands for things like stormwater retention, flood mitigation, and green space along with that wildlife habitat. As such, the DNR has an increasing role in assisting these entities with their wetland projects, as they in return assist the DNR with our wetland projects. A primary point of our cooperation is around that funding to protect lands and restore the wetlands function. The DNR utilizes funding through the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund, processes like our Land Exchange Facilitation Fund, or LEF, license sales, specifically those of our waterfowl license, or what's called the Michigan Duck Stamp, and at times appropriations from the legislature, like the recent American Rescue Plan Act, funds or general fund to achieve the state's wetland conservation goals. But we couldn't have achieved our past successes, nor could we tackle the future challenges without leveraging our partners and those joint funding opportunities. We've cooperatively worked with partners to seek funding through the North American Wetlands Conservation Act, or NAWCA, for over 25 years. We've collectively brought millions into Michigan for wetlands and associated upland habitat through that NAWCA program since the late 80s. The same can be said for opportunities through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, or the GLRI, that launched in 2010, where millions of non-state dollars, again, have been put to work for Michiganders and those that depend on the Great Lakes. Often, participation by the DNR and Wildlife Division in these proposals harnesses those limited state funds to match federal funds several magnitudes greater for us and our partners here in Michigan. So I just want to put a finer point on that the little bit that we bring to the table as DNR can unlock 1, 2, 3, sometimes up to 10 times as much funding from private sources and the federal government.
Calvin, I have a question. With the GLRI funding, has any of those funds been rescinded on the federal level?
Not that I know of. Again, I've been with DNR now for under a month.
Sure.
In my time at Ducks Unlimited, we did not have any that were rescinded. I don't know if anybody has any other thoughts in the room or any awareness.
Not to our knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
So a 2023 appropriation of American Rescue Plan Act funds, or ARPA, you'll hear us talk about, has allowed the DNR to harness those longstanding partnerships, so all the folks that were on the slide before, and bring in these fledgling cooperatives to work in areas with partners beyond our traditional spaces, like with drain commissioners, local units of government, all for that shared goal of wetland conservation. Several are listed on this slide, but we couldn't fit them all. So ones that I'd like to also note are the Thumb Land Conservancy, Springfield Township, Michigan Land Conservancy, Bay Creek Farms, Friends of the Rouge, and Oakland County Parks. I know I've mentioned it at length here, but I want to be very clear that we rely on all of these organizations and these different funding sources to get our goal or to reach our objectives around wetland habitat. And this includes those wetlands for our hunters, our birders, our trappers, anglers, and really anybody that appreciates the outdoors. Alright, so before I jump into a few examples of recently completed projects with the leverage mix of state and federal funds, I wanted to highlight a specific funding source on the state's end, which originates from our $12 Michigan duck stamp that permits waterfowl hunting statewide. Of that $12, $1.93 of every license goes to the function and operations of our state's managed waterfowl areas. But $9, or 75% of each license sold, is specifically set aside for wetland conservation projects, those that acquire, restore, enhance, or maintain our high-quality wetlands. The majority of that $9 per license funds innovative efforts to increase wetland function, or its seed money to be able to kick off a large-scale, multi-year project to restore wetlands by starting that engineering and design process, and thereby making the project more competitive to be completed by those outside funding sources like GLRI or NACA. An example of this is the ongoing wetland restorations associated with the Black River Drain at our Fenville Farm unit of Allegan State Game Area. Similarly, these funds have been spent for work at our heavily utilized managed waterfall areas like Point Mouillet State Game Area, which I'll talk a little bit about next. But my final point is that state funds like these, including those special appropriations like ARPA or the general fund wetland dollars, are key to unlocking those wetland conservation projects and catalyzing the work getting done on the ground.
Kelly, I have another question. Looking at the partnerships involved, has there been any discussion internally, this would probably be a better question for others in the room since you're brand new, but this seems like tailor-made for the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, which is a federal program. Has there been any investigation into submitting an application for money through that program?
So I can't comment on terms of the DNR, but maybe Randy or Sarah could, but I am familiar with the RCPP, or the Regional Conservation Partners Program. That is a great way to utilize federal funding through the Natural Resources Conservation Services. And so that's one that we've looked into as partners, although we don't have anything right now. And Sarah, if you have anything to add of other departments.
I don't have anything to add to that, but I will look into that. I don't know knowledge about that. We may be doing something with that, but I don't know.
I do know that there has been talk of continued funding for that program. Obviously, there's been a lot of cuts on the federal level. That program, though, is my understanding that will most likely be funded for fiscal year 26. That might be something that really the department should look into. It is designed to have local partners on the ground working together to combat some of these issues, and I see that as a clear fit for what you're working on.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, that's absolutely right. We know that MDARD has some RCPP, but there's a lot of programs, we can get into the Farm Bill acronyms, but there's a lot of different programs and practices that are available for wetlands. through the NRCS. It's available through that program. All right. All right, so I'm going to walk through a few project examples that highlight the breadth of our work throughout the state. So one big bucket of projects we like to think about are managed coastal wetlands, or coastal wetlands in general. So our U.S. coastlines are being asked to accommodate as much commerce, tourism, development, and wildlife habitat as possible. These pressures are not any different on our Great Lakes coastlines. As such, we do more with less to squeeze as much productivity for wildlife as possible within the existing footprint of our coastal areas managed by the DNR. I'll point an example of this is at Point Muye State Game Area, just south of the city of Detroit, which routinely hosts rare wildlife, birders, hunters, and the public more generally. We've been working with partners like Ducks Unlimited to reduce invasive plant coverage and increasing availability of variable wetlands, like moist soil units and emergent marshes, through infrastructure projects in the Humphreys unit that then reestablish the Bad Creek, Cripple Point, and Point Sec units, reclaiming them from a previously unavoidable Phragmites monoculture due to altered hydrology. And I don't have a pointer, but I will point out on the screen, so the top of the photo here, that is Lake Erie. In the bottom left is where you can see those units that are managed individually. That allows for the managers down at Point Muye to be able to mimic the wetlands or the water levels that they need for both the vegetative harvest, but also, or the vegetation to come up, and also for waterfowl to come in. Wetland infrastructure such as these projects then allows that management of water levels to mimic the natural coastal fluctuations, which is not really possible on the coastlines of southeast Michigan due to inland development pressure and hardened shorelines that don't allow naturally dynamic wetlands to exist in most areas. The result is an actively managed area that's then cherished by birders, hunters, and those looking for a nature-based escape in southeast Michigan. The coastal projects tend to make a big splash, but we also are working with our partners to complete many other wetland projects inland. Recent work at several of our Lower Peninsula state game areas showcased impactful efforts to undo a century of wetland drainage through low-tech and low-maintenance projects. Again, I'm going to walk you through this a little bit so you know what we're looking at here. The image that's shown on the left of the screen is a pre-restoration look of aerial imagery at the Osceola Muskogees Grassland State Game Area, where several ditches were excavated over 100 years ago to drain a wetland complex for farming and cattle production. You can see on the screen the lighter areas where the natural wetland basins formerly occurred. We used equipment to disable subsurface drainage tiles and then gently grade the land to restore the wetland basins, much like the center and the right images, which are from a different project at Adams Township State Game Area in Hillsdale County. These projects have all demonstrated immediate results for wildlife habitat, floodwater retention, and outdoor recreation, all through the project designs that are very low maintenance. So you'll see on the bullet here, we're talking about wetlands that are less than 5 acres. They're incredibly important for producing waterfowl, which we'll talk a little bit about next. A recent series of wetland restoration projects at Potterville State Game Area and Eaton County achieved similar results for similar goals, but is located in Eaton County. Much of the land was either in row crop, hay, or cattle production throughout its history prior to state ownership. Artificial drainage was disabled, things like drain tiles, ditches, and then it was graded. It was graded to have that shallow mix of wetlands and then grasslands and early successional habitat, all within a new state game area already heavily utilized by the public. These small and sometimes seasonal wetlands amid grassland complexes are those that are the most productive for waterfowl like mallards and blue-winged teal here in Michigan. They're so important that there are organized multi-state efforts to protect them and return them to the landscape. Essentially, this is the best that we can do for those already altered wetlands, and we get to see immediate results. So our wetland conservation work here in Michigan is aligned with and contributing to regional habitat strategies for waterfowl, waterbirds, shorebirds, and landbirds, such as those of the Upper Mississippi and Great Lakes Region joint venture. Our on-the-ground wetland conservation efforts, with many partners already mentioned, has jump-started an ongoing multi-state collaboration to seek funding through NACA for wetland and grassland complexes in the core breeding range of ducks in Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, which is shown in that thunderstorm map on the right. All of the red is the highest breeding, highest priority breeding. Thank you. The importance of these habitat complexes for waterfowl were reaffirmed with the recent research into dynamics and movements of our Great Lakes mallard production population. We've leaned in heavily to the wildlife benefits of wetland conservation, but I want to close with a reminder that completed projects not only provide ecological value for wildlife, but they provide other services such as flood attenuation, groundwater recharge, green space, nutrient retention and transformation, and irreplaceable places for outdoor recreation. And with that, Randy and I will be happy to address any other questions that you may have about wetland conservation.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Questions from commissioners?
Fine job, by the way, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to note that there is a legislative report in the commissioner's packet, and it's linked online with our agenda. We will now go to, and I have to point to note the time. The time is 11:32, and we are, Brooke Parmalee will be here to, pardon?
Do you want to take a break or no?
Oh, yeah, that's a very good idea. Thank you. I rely on Brooke to remind me of all the important stuff like that. We'll take a 5-minute break and be back here in, how about 11:40. Craig, you want to manhandle a couple commissioners in here? Yeah. There we go.
Want to get paid for?
First, anybody missing some keys? We got keys here. You're not gonna get far.
Oh, my God.
But they're up here. This looks like a Subaru, maybe?
Oh, they're not Toyota?
All right, it's 11:44, and we're going to begin the public appearance portion. And this is the 5-minute comment period.
So for those of you that signed up before the end of the day, last Friday, you have 5 minutes to give your comments. For those of you that signed up after, you have 3 minutes and a number of cards that signed up today. But if you do want to give comment and you haven't signed up yet, you can fill out a card in the back. Amanda has those. And if anybody emailed my personal email, usually I get the comment sign-ups in the NRC mailbox, but I got a lot in my own. So if I did miss you signing up for 5 minutes, just let us know and we'll get you added to the list. When you have 1 minute left, I'll hold up the 1 minute sign, and when your time is up, I will hold up the time please sign. And we ask that you bring your comments to a close, and if you could please state your name for the record. And also, just keep an eye on me, so we keep time pretty on point today, because we have a lot of sign-ups. So, thank you.
Our first presenter is Thad Dickinson. Iris Potter. Oh, excuse me. Iris is next.
Commissioners, Director Bowen, I'm here today not just as a citizen of Michigan.
Can you turn your mic on?
About now. Okay, all right, thanks. Commissioners, Director Bowen, I'm here today, Thad Dickinson is my name. I'm here today not just as a citizen of Michigan, but also a beneficiary of something far larger than myself, the public trust that governs our state's natural resources, including fish and wildlife. To the extent that any one species can own another, the public trust doctrine holds that Michigan's wildlife belongs to every citizen of this state. The principle is clear in the first tenet of the North American Model of Wildlife Conservation. Quote, wildlife is held in trust by the government for the benefit of all, end quote. The DNR's Wildlife Division strategic plan affirms that tenet, stating, quote, wildlife resources are held in trust by government for the people of Michigan, end quote. This means the state of Michigan has an affirmative duty to manage and protect these resources for both present and future generations, making you, as the National Resources Commission, the trustees of Michigan's wildlife. Trusteeship is a solemn legal duty, and as the trustee of our wildlife, you must manage with care, science, transparency, and always with fidelity to the beneficiaries. And the beneficiaries here are not just those who farm, hunt, and trap, but also those who hike, camp, photograph, study, and simply value wildlife for its own intrinsic worth, even if they never engage with it. The Michigan Supreme Court said that the state's trusteeship requires, quote, accountability to the people, end quote. Therefore, your decisions regarding the management of the state's wildlife must be made with the utmost loyalty to all Michiganders. This is why your recent commitment to flip-flop on the year-round coyote hunting season on public land is such a serious breach of the public trust. Your August 14th resolution, by extension WCO Amendment Number 4 of 2025, ignores the public trust mandate to conserve and protect resources. It treats coyotes, a public trust resource, as if they are vermin to be eliminated rather than wildlife to be responsibly stewarded. It undermines the very notion that wildlife belongs to everyone, reducing coyotes to a target rather than a valued part of Michigan's ecosystems. Declaring the species open to harvest 365 days a year, including nights, is not conservation, it's an application of it. And it undermines the principle of management for the benefit of all and not just a few. Your resolution also fails the requirement of science-based management required of you as trustee, Proposal G, in the North American Model of Wildlife Conservation. The peer-reviewed science is crystal clear. Lethal, indiscriminate coyote removal rarely achieves the stated goals of reducing their population and predation on deer or livestock. In fact, by destabilizing populations through indiscriminate exploitation, your resolution will increase breeding rates, ensuring conflicts with humans rather than reducing them. But you know all this already. You defended it in court and won. Abandoning that science is abandoning your role as trustee. Finally, your resolution erodes public confidence. If this commission sets regulations that appear to be driven by pressure rather than science and ethics, people rightly ask, who are you serving? Are you upholding your duty as trustee to all Michiganders, or bending to the loudest voices? I suppose it's just a coincidence that your resolution came just over 2 months after Senator Bakenga and Representative Fairburn introduced legislation for a year-round hunting season, a bill that was unlikely to pass if the NRC kept the 3-month quiet period. And less than 2 months after Ted Nugent's hysterics at the Capitol and subsequent conversation with Director Bowen. Your resolution is stained by politics and preference, and every time the public trust is compromised, confidence in this commission weakens. I'm not saying that the concerns and perspectives of farmers and hunters aren't valid, just that they aren't more valid than mine. It must be addressed within a framework of stewardship for all. For many members of NUCC and MTPCA, the only good coyote is a dead coyote, and thus every coyote in Michigan is by fault a nuisance or threat. Your resolution is a handout to that perspective, even though the majority of Michiganders reject it. There's no tyranny of the majority when hunters and trappers can already legally take coyotes 9 out of 12 months on public land and year-round on private land, day and night. The public trust isn't optional, it's your mandate. I don't have fame or political power or special interest connections, but I am no less a Michigander and no less a stakeholder in our natural resources than those who do, and I expect the trustee of our wildlife to act accordingly. Your commitment to extend the coyote hunting season after willfully ignoring the large body of peer-reviewed science and in a way disproportionately in a way that disproportionately benefits special interest groups over the public at large is a breach of your fundamental duty as trustee. This isn't just about coyotes, of course. It's about whether the Natural Resources Commission will uphold its duty as a trustee, whether it will manage with science and transparency, and whether it will safeguard wildlife as a shared resource for all Michiganders. Anything less is a betrayal of the public trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dickinson. Next is Iris Bull.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Iris Potter from Palmville. I will begin by addressing the email I sent you all after the August meeting. Myself and many others don't understand how coyotes can be labeled as a nuisance when on public land. I also requested the links to the countless pages of scientific literature that have been presented to justify a year-round coyote season. It is important that the public see these documents to better understand what important data is being used for decision-making. I have not received any information from my request. It was clear while watching the meeting that the DNR does not have exact coyote numbers, which is understandable. Also, I wish that we could have viewed the discussion which led to your new resolution of commitment to coyote hunting year-round. However, I'm very relieved that you held the protective free for banning coyotes this year anyway. We do know that Proposal G requires NRC to utilize principles of sound scientific management when making all decisions. Let us remember public trust law. Regarding public access to view and comment at the meetings with the DNR live stream so that folks who cannot travel far can engage in comment, I ask you to strongly consider this again. It's been done before. So today I'm also addressing coexistence, which is not a new concept, but one that is being used on the ground in many places. For one, the National Institute of Health has written about its importance in SAT. A widely accepted definition of coexistence is that it is a dynamic but sustainable state in which humans and wildlife co-adapt to living in shared areas where law or human interactions with wildlife are governed by effective institutions that ensure long-term wildlife population persistence, social legitimacy, and tolerable levels of risk. In your copy of my comments, I have included a number of other links with definitions. One coexistence example is the wolf ranger and his team, which is studying coexistence, or co-thriving, as he calls it. He has figured ways to have wolves and his multi-generational ranch thrive together while developing a wonderful friendship in the process. He says that there is a way forward without conflict. I encourage you to check out what his team is doing to build bridges at thewolfranger.com. There is a PBS documentary about his work called Wolfland. No cost, link provided. In Danbury County near me, I met a man from a generational family farm who practices coexistence with non-lethal predator mitigation. He works with ranchers around him to teach his methods. A friend from the UP also told me that someone near them practices the use of non-lethal methods. I understand that the DNR also does assist ranchers. I will address coexistence again sometime because it is important that we all learn it, because today we have wildlife habitat fragmentation and much urban development, some rural as well, which results in humans and wildlife having more contact, so coexistence is logical. We can move beyond outdated game management models and into a future of coexistence and fairness for all life. Continuing to blame wolves and other wildlife while not using available tools for coexistence in these times seems illogical and a mistake. Much of the animal world coexists, so it should be our lesson learned and adopted.
Thank you, Iris. B. Freelander.
Good morning, Commissioners and Director Bowen. I'm B. Friedlander with Attorneys for Animals. And as Larry David is said to have said once, quote, a good compromise is when both parties are dissatisfied. In the case of the coyote hunting season, this commission's actions over the past 1.5 years prove David is only half right. No one is happy, but it's not a good compromise. And this controversy will continue to fester into next year at least. After your action at the last meeting, confusion reigned immediately after this non-binding resolution with pro-year-round hunting folks, including 2 Michigan legislators who had introduced legislation to require year-round hunting, initially claiming victory. As people actually read the resolution, both sides were dissatisfied. There was an attempt to do some cleanup, and here are 2 explanations from commissioners since the August meeting. An outdoor news article in late August quotes a commissioner, quote, we're trying to pull off a twofer where we can protect the quiet period and address any issues with coyotes, end quote. But some have interpreted this as a plan to reinstate a year-round coyote hunting season, but that's not accurate. Quote, It's a political spin. We're all working so coyotes can be removed where they're a problem. That's our goal. We also want to protect the quiet period so animals have time to raise their young. There's another quote that says, and this was in Bridge magazine, during the 3-month off season, to allow coyotes causing a nuisance on public land to be killed. Note, the rationale behind the expansion of nuisance animals, excuse me, in 2023 was to lessen the administrative time in managing private property nuisance animals. This was CO Amendment 6 of 2023. But it looks like the commission has backed itself into a corner of having to do a major overhaul of the nuisance wildlife order. I'm not going to read last month's resolution. I think you all know it, but I want to point out 2 words in there that back up what I'm saying, that this is creating a big mess. It's now going to be coyotes on public and private land that are going to be somehow managed. And then the term, through a combination of hunting, trapping, and legal take of nuisance and damaging animals. That introduces a whole new concept into this. It's always been nuisance, but now we have damaging. So, with that, I will go on to my second point, which is the Wildlife Action Plan. The deadline for comment is tomorrow, so that's what I'm going to be doing when I get home and all day tomorrow. I will compliment the huge amount of research that's gone into it and the fact that it's very comprehensive. I noticed there's a law and policy section, which is my bag, so to speak. But I'm concerned about the rollout. The way I heard about it at the end of August was someone sent me a link to a UP newspaper, which had picked up on the story. And the way that people can comment is somewhat off-putting. You have to really, really want to comment, and you have to really, really have to have a lot of time. It should be, and the other thing is, the appendices are not there. You cannot get a comprehensive view of the Wildlife Action Plan just by looking at the information on the website. And I would just say I would appreciate it if you could give a little more time for commenting, because I know you're now starting to publicize it, but with the deadline tomorrow, that's a kind of too little too late. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Paul Rose. I'm sorry, Marcy, we'll get you next, okay?
All set? Yes. Hi, I'm Paul Rose from Montmorency County. Good morning / afternoon, commissioners and director. I'm here today to, my comments were distributed electronically, included some mapping information. Hopefully you had a chance to see those. I'm here today to speak to the issue, proposed underwater spearfishing regulations. As a member of the underwater spearfishing work group, I had an opportunity to participate in the process, which ultimately led to the recommendations presented. Let me begin by saying that the process employed was developed in a responsive manner and reflected the discussions and comments which were provided in both the in-person meeting as well as the discussions that took place remotely. It is worth recalling that the original request made of the NRC, which led to Fisheries Order 219 and approved in 2021, was to provide an opportunity to harvest table-worthy game fish using methods and locations as defined. That was provided. As described in the work group's executive summary, the reported harvest was dominated by an exceptionally small number of anglers. Fish harvest reported through 2024 indicates that 70% of the walleye harvest and 66% of the total harvest was accomplished by 10 individuals. Given the limited level of participation, expansion of waters and species would appear to be unwarranted at this time. This has also required a disproportionate level of DNR staff and financial resources to be expended on a program which appears to be benefiting so few. In spite of this limited participation and reporting, the provisions of the 2021 underwater spearfishing regulations did in fact provide these harvest opportunities, and these allowed to be continued under the recommendations made as a result of the work group process. Although underwater spearfishing proponents are seeking expanded geographic opportunities and species, the limited and declining rate of participation and other concerns shared by some work group members ultimately led to the recommendation to at least allow the practice to continue within the current regulatory arrangement. Since the topic of geographic expansion is likely to be advocated for both today and in the future, I did want to share some concerns which I have and that have been expressed by others during the deliberations. In addition to the obvious concerns regarding the potential social or user conflicts if this method of harvest were allowed to expand to inland lakes and streams, I am convinced that if this practice were allowed to expand to certain areas of the northern Great Lakes, this method of take has the potential to result in an additive harvest of unique populations of game fish which seldom otherwise occur. Although many view our Great Lakes as vast freshwater oceans, in the northern areas of both Lake Michigan and Lake Huron, hundreds of thousands of acres of archipelago reefs exist with waters which typically range from 1 to 5 feet in depth. In these areas of the Great Lakes, especially during post-spawn periods, isolated and unique populations of northern pike, smallmouth bass, and other species typically seek refuge in these warmer waters of these reefs. During such times, these fish, some have been found to be 15 to 20 years old, can be exceptionally difficult to catch using traditional means, but are typically lethargic and can be readily approached underwater. Since many of these fish continue to habituate these areas after the underwater spearfishing season opens, the potential impact is unlikely to be mitigated by manipulating season dates. While I would be the first to concede that underwater spearfishing, while fully submerged with no supplemental breathing, can be an extremely challenging method of harvest, in these Great Lake areas, where vast areas of water depths less than 5 feet exist, this method has the potential to have profound impacts on these unique populations. I also have concerns about the potential adverse impacts which could result from novice underwater spearfishing participants in these locations who do not possess the necessary skills to limit fish mortality, where the impact of this practice on this fishery could far exceed that of stated creel limits. Future and public angler support for the practice of underwater spearfishing will continue as long as viewed as being a method of take which is compatible with traditional means of fishery harvest and does not provide a significant advantage over conventional practices. As a final comment, I would discourage the Department and Commission from offering special experimental seasons in the future. We've seen this many times in the past, and each of these seasons have nearly always been made permanent in some form. Perhaps the main argument, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Marcy Terwilliger?
As you just heard, I'm Marcy Terwilliger. In a Gaylord meeting last month, a commenter expressed frustration that he could, quote, only wound coyotes, end quote. Another speaker tried to make the argument that any concern for orphaned or starving pups was somehow, quote, ridiculous because they kill fawns and people are giving them human-like emotions. So compassion shown to wild ones suffering is hypocrisy? Another gent was perturbed about the shortened season, saying he wasn't aware of any scientific data or studies showing risk of pups orphaned or harmed. What wasn't said, and what most of us know through the wizardry of common sense, is that dead mom plus dependent pups equals bad things. There is an ongoing concerted effort to further objectify and commodify the sentient beings who live amongst us. They are mere resources to be harvested, as some project. It's a dark and regressive perspective to harbor, and it's toxic to a healthy policy structure. Responsible stewardship doesn't look like this. Next topic, as the season is upon us, baiting. Reviewing the peninsula-specific rules, both baiting and recreational feeding are allowed in the upper with some exceptions, but the line between the two gets murky. In one instance, a wolf was seen at a mineral lick. Due to that ambiguity, it was ruled to be residential allowed, even though it occurred at a hump camp. Some of you may recall wolves coming into a small town surrounded by Ottawa forest. Incident reports revealed that Marinesco residents feeding the deer was the main attractant. It showed the practice had formed what was essentially a deer expressway, with one wolf fatally struck and several deer hit by cars. Of course, in artificial feeding, the close proximity of animals is the ideal transmission path for CWD, with record numbers of positive cases in Wisconsin. This prompted the CDC, when we still had one, to recommend not consuming flesh from infected deer. And as of last week's notice from DNR, we have episodic hemorrhagic disease right here. In this fraught environment, continuing to allow baiting seems pretty counterintuitive to me. Next topic, Proposal G. When we approved it in '96, the assumption was the NRC would make sound and scientific and fair decisions for all Michiganders. But there is an inordinate degree of deference extended to hunters and trappers and what could accurately be called a bastardization of Prop G's intent. We repeatedly see an outsized and hostile indignation from the faction whenever the non-consumptive element weighs in. That would be we who prefer to enjoy our state's menagerie of fantastic beasts alive rather than dead. Our wildlands are to be held in the public trust. That includes those who acknowledge all critters' right to be. I'll close with this final item, which isn't the NRC's decision, but is germane. The partisan bills to create a UP-specific NRC, sponsored by an all-Republican group of legislators. We're not unaware of the artifice at play here. I am opposed to this blatant end run around public trust for all. Sport killers don't get to be the sole arbiters on who lives and who doesn't. Please remember that as you craft wildlife policy for all of us.
Thank you. Next is Paige Swinney.
Page 20.
Could you turn your mic on, please? Or talking to it?
Yes, I can. My name is Paige Swinney. Thank you for providing me an opportunity to share my testimony on underwater spearfishing. I've lived most of my life near water with a fishing license, scuba certification, and I'm also a recent member of Michigan Spearfishing Association. I've watched the spearfishing community grow from afar and desperately wanted to be a part of it. In 2024, John Durkin invited me to a spearfishing tournament where I volunteered entering data of competitors, fished, and met many amazing people. About a month later, I had an opportunity to try it out. I'd never been freediving before, and that proved a challenge all on its own. The remainder of the season, I became more comfortable freediving in depths of around 10 or 15 feet, just rock hunting, picking up trash, discarded lines in the works. My latest fishing experiences have been guided trips with Captain Kirk Hyman or John and Riley, where it's relaxed, waiting for a bite of some unknown fish. I get handed a rod, learn a few techniques, reel it in, and they tell me what I've caught. If it's legal, they give me a high five and take a few pictures. Not a whole lot of thought goes into my day other than snacks and sunscreen. Angling is an activity I enjoy wholeheartedly with friends and family, but never has the concern for sustainability crossed my mind. I buy my license, abide by laws and regulations, and have fun. I haven't paid attention to limits versus safe consumption quantities, or even the effects of catch and release or holding fish in a live well. Now that I know what it takes to be successful in spearfishing, the respect I have for the resource has greatly increased. I take what I'm able based off my knowledge, physical abilities, and water conditions. If I don't know size and species, I don't shoot. If the fish are at depths I can't reach, I can't spearfish. I must put in more work to understand regulations because I don't have a phone or measuring tape underwater to verify any of those things. I'm not in this to just shoot and kill fish. I want to eat the fish I harvest. Water clarity, currents, and even attendance on the water have a significant impact on my ability to harvest as well. If the area is too busy, we find a different location. We choose safe distances not just for our protection, but out of respect for other boaters as well. The limitations of spearfishing far exceed that of hook and line, so when conditions are poor or the species I'm allowed to spearfish are not accessible, I'm unable to participate. The spearfishing license does not increase my bag limit, nor does it increase my rate of success. It does, however, allow me to be more conscientious of my harvest. With more species and waterways available for spearfishing, it would allow me more opportunities in the future.
Thank you. Next is Lori Beckler.
Good afternoon. My name is Lori Batchelor, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today about expanding our Great Lakes spearfishing opportunities here in Michigan. For just a little bit of background, I grew up in Port Huron, spending my summers fishing Lake Huron and Saginaw Bay with my dad and winter ice fishing. We fished mainly for perch, but occasionally I'd go drifting with him near the St. Clair River for walleye. He carved wooden fish decoys out of mahogany for ice fishing and collected antique fishing lures. He truly just loved the history of fishing in the Great Lakes. From him, I inherited both a love of the outdoors and a respect for our natural resources. Later, I moved to Florida to study marine biology and spent over a decade living and working on the water. My career with organizations like NOAA and the Florida Department of Environmental Protection centered on data collection and education, and it deepened my passion for sustainable management practices. It was also in Florida that I was first introduced to underwater spearfishing. Watching some of my good friends navigate freediving to 50 feet of water, shooting a snapper under a ledge, while avoiding sharks and securing the catch. It was so different from the fishing I grew up with. When I moved back home to Michigan, I was excited to learn about the new regulations for spearfishing in the Great Lakes that included species like walleye and lake trout. This gave me a renewed excitement to get back out on the water and fish for species I did as a kid. Right now, underwater spearfishing is restricted to just a few waters. This concentrates effort, limits participation, and often requires long travel times. For example, from Battle Creek, where I currently reside, I drive 2 to 3 hours to reach permitted waters on the east side of the state, and if conditions are poor, the trip could be wasted. On the west side, Grand Haven could have poor visibility, but just a little north of Muskegon could be perfect conditions. Restricting movement around the lakes also creates more opportunity for conflict, especially if it's a busier weekend on the water. By aligning spearfishing regulations more closely with hook and line fishing statewide, as coastal states do, we can distribute pressure more evenly, reduce conflicts, and make the sport more accessible. We should also consider species opportunities. In Florida, people don't spearfish just to manage less desirable fish or invasives, like the lionfish. They spearfish for the opportunity to eat game fish like grouper, mahi, wahoo, tuna, hogfish, mackerel, jacks, snappers, and many other species. Each game fish has a size and bag limit as well as different seasons for harvest, and all anglers are expected to follow. For example, you can only take hogfish that are at least 16 inches, and the limit is 1 per person per day in Florida. It is the responsibility of the angler to know and understand the rules and regulations for any fish they intend to take, and if they are not following these rules, there are penalties. This is a huge responsibility, as with many saltwater species, they can look extremely similar during different life stages. There's also many different species in the same family. For example, there's 15 different species of grouper in Florida alone. It takes time and skill to correctly identify, size, and spear those fish underwater. My approach has always been slow and steady, learning one species at a time and really spending time in the water with it, observing until I was comfortable to harvest. I bring that same mentality back to the Great Lakes with me. But here in Michigan, spearfishers are more limited, even for species that hook and line anglers can already take. As licensed anglers, I believe we should have access to the same harvest opportunities. Expanding the species list would not only reduce pressure on current permitted waters, but also encourage participation by giving people the chance to bring home the fish they actually want to eat and share with their families. Finally, I want to emphasize the nature of spearfishing itself. It is highly selective and sustainable. You're diving underwater on a single breath, choosing exactly which fish to target, meaning there's virtually no bycatch. In our community, we have a saying, if you don't know, let it go. If you're unsure about a fish's size or species, you simply don't take the shot. Unlike hook and line fishing, where fish might swallow hooks or suffer injuries that lead to mortality regardless of size or species, spearfishing minimizes unintended mortality. When we catch 5 walleye, we're done for the day, versus a hook and line angler could potentially catch 10 walleye, release 5 due to being too small. Every fish caught and released risks harm and potential for adverse events. The environmental footprint is also lighter for underwater spearfishing. No hooks, no lines, no lead left behind. And many of us even collect litter as we dive. This is a community that cares deeply about the health of our waters. In closing, I urge the NRC to consider these points. By expanding allowable waters, access to species, and acknowledging the selective and environmentally friendly nature of spearfishing, we can create a sustainable and vibrant freshwater spearfishing community here in Michigan. Let's build on what we know works and ensure that everyone, spearfishers and hook, line, and anglers alike, have a fair and well-managed chance to enjoy our state's incredible resource.
Thank you.
Next is Mackenzie Parsons.
Hello, my name is Mackenzie Parsons. I am a 30-year-old Michigan native, a nursing student, and I'm thankful to be able to speak with you today about spearfishing as a first-generation hunter and angler. I grew up loving and being in nature, but my uncle was the only outdoorsman I knew, and I was fascinated by his family as they introduced me to conservation and advocating for wildlife and the outdoors. I had the privilege of being inspired by their commitment to nature and sporting both, and this is now the lifestyle I've been passionate to pursue. My previous angling experiences in the last few years began wading salmon runs on the Manistee River, but I've since branched into learning many other methods of fishing in stunning spaces to gain skills to provide and enjoy angling in new ways. Among these, spearfishing is the newest and has been the most demanding and transformative. Being able to develop the skills necessary and access these opportunities are of much personal value to me. Since beginning nursing school, like with many Americans, money is extremely tight. I depend almost explicitly on wild game to fill my freezer to last me every year. Deer, turkey, duck, salmon, and even sheephead. I am excited to take part in the hope for more variety in locations in spearfishing. Harvesting wildlife to me, though, through means like spearfishing is about stewarding skills and natural resources well. And I have a lot of gratitude for how the DNR manages on our behalf. As a licensed healthcare professional and as a licensed hunter and angler, I have a strong commitment to these privileged parts of my life with moral safety and deep respect for life. I believe in building a respectable name for hunting and fishing. As a lifelong learner, newer to angling and especially new to spearfishing, I've been given more opportunity to learn about species than any other form of angling has offered through spearfishing. We often spend time as a group on the boat with John and others as they help teach us about how to accurately confirm different features and regulations together. I've been able to learn that freediving and its challenges give plenty of time to study the fish, confirm species with your dive mates, and choose whether to pursue or simply appreciate the wildlife in ways that catch and release and other methods have never offered me. If I'm blessed enough to have a successful chase, I'm thankful. I've had so much joy in just being down there and being mentored in this way with purpose. I've been so inspired by anglers in this community who have helped me shape my perspectives and understanding on wildlife management and how to balance that with enjoying the sport of angling. The community and myself are currently limited by accessibility in southern Michigan. For the times I have gone, I wake up at 5 a.m. and drive 4 hours to dive. I live in Metro Detroit area surrounded by inland lakes and only about 30 minutes away from Lake Erie. Expanding the bodies of water open to spearfishing would give me more opportunities and also allow others to chase it and experience that I've been so thankful, a chance to experience what I've been so thankful to see and appreciate in the state of Michigan. For these reasons, I'm happy to advocate for expanding the species of fish and bodies of water through spearfishing in Michigan. Freediving ensures the sport will remain selective, but expanding species brings more opportunity to responsibly provide for ourselves, build community, and deepen our relationship with nature. My hope is to continue investing in the sport, stewarding nature well, and encourage others to see both the honor and responsibility in angling in this way.
Thank you. Taylor Kane.
Keep up together, we're a group, is that okay?
Yeah. I assume it's Travis?
Yes.
Travis, want to get time together or separate?
Separate.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Travis Schaefer. I would like to start by sincerely thanking the commissioners and everyone involved who made it possible for us to responsibly harvest walleye, pike, and lake trout over the last few years. Despite the long travel distance to reach water within the boundary zones, my family and I have made some incredible memories in the water spearfishing for walleye. None of this would have been possible without the driven and inspiring people we have with us here today. So thank you. I've been spearfishing for 11 years. When I started in 2014, there was hardly any interest in the sport because you could only shoot rough fish. And frankly, not many people enjoy eating them. When Fisheries Order 219.22 was established, allowing us to spear walleye, pike, and lake trout, every walleye angler I knew was interested in buying spear guns and gear. Little did we all know this was much easier said than done. We would drive 2 or 3 hours to spear walleye, only to be met with poor visibility, unable to dive. When we finally had a day with good visibility, we realized swimming underwater and holding your breath for more than a minute was key. During your descent, you often spook most of the fish, so you need to be skilled enough to lay on the bottom and wait to draw their curiosity back in. This wasn't easy either. But seeing it all underwater and interacting with these fish face to face is truly a life-changing experience. The fish I grew up sitting on a boat waiting for a bite, I was now seeing them in their natural habitat and seeing how they interact with one another and myself. This close connection to the water led me to start a group called Michigan Trash Divers. With the help from my awesome girlfriend Taylor, my son Riley, and some great friends, we are trying to create a new culture among the spearfishing community that is all about environmental stewardship. My hope is that picking up trash while spearfishing will become the new standard. On every outing, we do everything we can to collect any waste we see. We most often find old fishing line, plastic lures, plastic packaging, glass bottles, lead weights, and even tires. I brought some photos to pass around if anyone would like to see some of what we've collected. In Michigan, there's an estimated 1.2 million fishing licenses sold each year. If you've ever been fishing, you probably lost a line or two with some form of plastic or lead. I know I'm guilty of it. Plastic and lead do not break down well in water. Now envision about 1 million people collectively losing a few lures and lead sinkers in a lake year after year. It all adds up. That's why I feel it's so important that we expand spearfishing in Michigan, because by encouraging its growth, we are allowing our state to have a healthier ecosystem. Just last week, while diving in Lake Huron, I pulled out a 5-horsepower outboard motor within 5 minutes of being in the water, and marked a brand new Minn Kota trolling motor. Some of these areas are underwater wastelands with decades-old trash piled on top of each other. At the rate we are currently losing items in the Great Lakes, we need all the help we can get to actively remove waste. In another instance, we have freed fish that were stuck on tackle snagged on the bottom of the lake in Port Huron. During a dive event on Glen Lake, a group of us discovered and removed a boat motor, a propeller, and many other pieces of trash. Considering how much can be found in just one day with minimal effort on a small lake, I can only imagine what we would find with more area to access. To conclude, I want to say again how grateful I am for being put on the agenda to speak today, and thank you to all the commissioners for listening. I hope you consider the expansion of spearfishing because I know it will increase the interest in our trash collection efforts. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Taylor Kane, and I've been spearfishing in the Great Lakes for about 2 years. In that time, I've learned that it's more than just a hobby. It's a form of active conservation. I'd like to share with you why I believe spearfishing is one of the most sustainable and exciting ways to experience our incredible freshwaters. Spearfishing leaves a minimal impact on the fragile Great Lakes ecosystem. There are no hooks or discarded fishing lines to become ghost gear. When I leave the lake, the water is cleaner than it was when I arrived. This low-impact approach ensures that my enjoyment of the lakes doesn't come at the expense of their long-term health. Expanding the boundaries for spearfishing will greatly increase the number of opportunities to get into those unseen areas and actively pull out litter, plastic bottles, the old cans, the lost lures that others have left behind. I've made incredible memories while spearfishing and cleaning up the lakes, and in doing so, I've experienced the one-of-a-kind complexity of nature underwater. Every time we go diving, it's almost guaranteed that we find a piece of trash or treasure. In that moment, it's not just trash, it's a discovery. It makes you feel like a kid on a treasure hunt, and that sense of excitement is a huge part of why this is resonating with the next generation. They see it not as a chore, but as a cool way to be an advocate for the environment. In conclusion, spearfishing for me is not just about the thrill of a big catch. It's about a personal connection to a vast and incredible ecosystem. Being selective by practicing stewardship, and by leaving no trace behind, I believe that my fellow spearfishers and I are doing our part to ensure that the beautiful Great Lakes remain a source of pride for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you both, and thank you to the Michigan Trash Baggers. Dan Kimmel? Excuse me, Dan Kimmel?
Oh, I get that all the time.
I'm Dan Kimmel. I'm Conservation Director for the Bass Federation of Michigan, West Michigan Bass, Payback Bass, and the DNR Sports Circuit. And that's what I'm speaking for today about two topics. The first is of utmost importance to us because we're concerned about the pressure being put by a small group of Lake Association members up north about gobies and smallmouth bass. I actually fished Burt Lake and Mullet Lake, and I have since 1991. And I have video all the way back in the early 2000s of gobies swimming around the bed. So I know they've been there close to 25 years. They've been in the Great Lakes for at least 35 years. If they were going to do the harm these people claim, we would know it by now. And we're not seeing that. In fact, our results show our bass fishing is better now than it's ever been. We just had there was only 2 spring tournaments up there. And I will say they put a lot of pressure on those tournament directors to shame them into having their fishing during June. And I thought that was borderline angler harassment myself. But the top 10 teams in one of those tournaments had 25 pounds plus for 5 smallmouth bass. That's a lot of trophy smallmouth bass caught in one day by a group of anglers. And we're seeing this everywhere. On Lake St. Clair, they just released that study, 50 years, saying right now are the good old days of bass fishing. And I've bass fished for over 50 years, and I agree. I mean, right now are the good old days. So it concerns me when non-scientists with money and active participation from a few key people start making us think that something extreme is going to happen after all the years we worked on getting the bass season where it is now. We don't want to see a loss after, I personally have been involved in 3 major bass season changes over 35 plus years. So I put a lot of time into this. I've seen other people do it, and it's concerning when they do this because they're looking in the water and thinking that's science. The science out there says, first of all, nobody's shown that gobies harm smallmouth bass anywhere. The one researcher that was really trying to do it, Mark Ridgway out of Ontario on Lake Erie, he actually printed in a magazine, I believe it was in Fisherman, but I talked to him a lot because he's always trying to prove fishing is bad for fishing. And he said the smallmouth bass goby war is over, the smallmouth bass have clearly won. And that's how we feel. The smallmouth bass are bigger and more numerous now than ever. So the last thing we want to do is take a step backwards. Smallmouth are spawning deeper because our water is getting clearer and cleaner, and that's being shown everywhere. Not just in Michigan, but down south even. They've seen bass as deep as 28 feet. Up there, I have video of bass in 18, 19 feet of water in Bird Lake. Again, I fished Bird Lake since 1991. I also have seen them eating gobies on the bed, and they don't spit them out. I think that's kind of cool. They eat them and they swallow them. So the smallmouth bass have won. And the last thing we want to see is for what people think they're seeing, who will not listen to the DNR, will not look at other studies that actually have been done to cause a non-scientific change in our fishing regulations. We do not want to see that. The other topic I'm just here to speak about underwater spearfishing. I'm required to say that we do oppose having bass as part of the creel for underwater spearfishing. 100% all the anglers I talked to at the outdoor shows this year and in all my other activities, we're just kind of terrified of that thought. Because basically we consider bass to be a trophy fish and not a eating fish. I do realize some people eat them, and we are not against people legally catching them and eating a few legally. But what we do acknowledge that spearfishing is a little different activity, and there are areas where members have specific concerns that large fish could be targeted. So what I did is I gave you a write-up and I proposed some ideas about protecting spawning fish, regardless of what you might end up doing, things like that, that just make it so that we feel that the fish are as protected as they can be, and yet these people still have more opportunity to fish. Because I am not opposed to them, like inland waters or other fish. Just I want it to be done in a way that protects all the fish very well and makes fishermen feel that it's being done. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Jonathan Dirkko.
Good afternoon, commissioners and director. I want to say first off and foremost, thank you for everybody for showing up today and giving testimony. I really think that is showing that we are a tight-knit crew. I want to also put here, I handed out a statement by a pure angler who was recently had an interaction with spearfishing, and he wrote up a comment, and that is on your desk so you can review that. So my name is Jonathan Dirkko. I've been advocating for underwater spearfishing in the Great Lakes for the last 6 years, since 2019, and I'm here today to just talk about some of the stuff in the recommendation for the Department of Natural Resources. Investing in Michigan's fisheries, this is a licensing restructure that Chief Claremont distributed. And right here it states the average amount of freshwater per fisheries biologist in the U.S. is 15,000 acres, but in Michigan it's 500,000 acres per biologist. And there's South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, Utah, Nebraska, Arkansas, with 15,000 acres approximately per biologist have spearfishing opportunities for these game fish, same or similar game fish that we have here. So I think that is a testament to how much opportunity we can provide for our spearfishing community. Commissioner Nyberg, I believe in 2021, I was asked approximately how many spearfishing anglers participate, and I estimated about 150 to 200 anglers participate with any kind of consistency, and I believe that's reflected right here. 186 anglers per year reported at least one trip or harvest, and I think that's very consistent with about 60 people reported more than 2 trips. And decreasing effort over time, it kind of demonstrates that once you get what you need, you don't have to go anymore. And opening up additional species in waters will give you the opportunity to go and chase fish that you want to. I don't need to go to Colorado and chase elk in the mountains, but man, is it cool, and you get to have an opportunity that you otherwise wouldn't. And I think that's a great demonstration of it's not necessarily about how many fish you get, it's about the opportunities that are unique and that can create very unique life experiences. Another thing I'd like to point out is that there's approximately 4,000 licenses issued per year, which demonstrates that there are people interested in this other than just the people who actually go. And I think expanding those opportunities is going to draw more people in. And then I believe just under voided licenses, they said 1,100 people just with the reporting alone said, I don't even want this license anymore. So just the reporting requirement pushed out an additional 1,000 people over 3 years. So I think it's another great point of just saying the burden of demonstration, how many times you're going. You know, a lot of people didn't report. You go in there and it says reporting required or monthly reporting required, and it clearly says right there, harvest report. Well, if I didn't harvest anything or I didn't go, why would I report? So that can very easily confuse, you know, a standard angler who's never had to report in their life when they're fishing activity. But I really do think it demonstrates that, you know, top 10 licensees harvested 70% of those walleye. So 70% of that 430 is 301 walleye. 10%, 10 anglers, you know, divide that by that 300, that's 30 walleye a year. You know, 70 of those came out of Saginaw Bay, the Lake Huron, which has Saginaw Bay, which has an abundance of walleye and a reduced limit, or a reduced size limit. So you can get 8 a day in MH4 at 13 and above. So it's very demonstrated that a few people were able to go to Lake Huron and kind of exploit that abundance of fish. And then, let's see here. And as far as fair chase goes, I want to demonstrate, we've done just about everything we can to ensure that. And that goes from getting rid of nighttime diving, get rid of scuba gear, making sure our diver down flags aren't in anybody's way, and really focusing only on the free dive aspect as well. Additionally, back in July of 2024, I did propose including in the evaluation of our spearfishing working group that we consider the prohibition of electronic underwater propulsion devices kind of as a fair chase and a public acceptance aspect to it, which was included, and it didn't come down through this recommendation, even after I emphasized that we support that, and fishery staff did indicate that they would support prohibiting that device. So just in closing, I do have an amendment if you guys would like to consider it for the next meeting, and thank you again for the opportunity to give a statement, and thank you guys for providing everybody in our community this opportunity.
Thank you. Next we have Riley Smith.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Riley Smith. I'm the Vice President of the Michigan Spearfishing Association, and I'm here to talk to you about fair chase. When we talk about fair chase, it's important to start with the actual definition. The Boone and Crockett Club, which first set the standard for ethical hunting in North America, defines fair chase as the ethical, sportsmanlike, and lawful pursuit of free-ranging wild game that does not give the hunter an improper or unfair advantage over the animal. That principle has carried forward into modern conservation. Fair chase means giving the fish a reasonable chance to escape and ensuring the method relies more on individual skill than artificial advantage. Now let's compare methods. I take a lot of people out hook and line fishing on the Great Lakes. A lot of people don't have much experience. I've got sonar, GPS, live scope, autopilot, planer boards, downers, 30 lines in the water, not that much, but you get what I'm saying. And you can just cover hundreds of feet on both sides of the boat. They can just sit on the boat, drink their beer, eat a sandwich, I get a fish on, make sure it's there, give them the rod, and he reels it in, I get the net, woo, you caught a fish. And they're very successful, and they can catch a limit very quickly. Does that make them a good fisherman? We'll say. But it shows just how much assistance hook and line anglers get today. When we compare that to underwater spearfishing, it doesn't work that way. There's no sonar once you get in the water. It's all on you. No electronics. There's no lures. Water, fish, and that's it. So the spearfisherman has their eyesight, They gotta worry about their breath hold, their ability to get close to the fish. Fish don't just lay on the bottom, they move around. They got those lateral bones, they can feel you coming down in the water, you get a little too crazy on them, they take right off. If you miss the shot, it's 2 minutes to reload. That's cool, that fish could be next county by now. Oh, you can't dive deep enough, you can't hold your breath long enough, no fish for you. Water visibility is the biggest limiting factor for us. You can be an amazing diver, you can dive 100 feet, you can't see 2 feet, you're not going to see any fish. Even when you use flashers to track fish, they'll come in and they're on, they're coming in the flasher, you start your dive, the second they feel you coming down, off they go. Every now and then they hang out just long enough so we can get close enough. But I would say that's the fairest chase available, really. It's just you, the fish, and your own effort. You don't have any technological advantage besides spear gun, really. Maybe the pole spear, you get your fins. This year I had a great example of how different these methods really are. We took a couple people out spearfishing for lake trout, who are all pretty good divers, I'd say. I managed after a couple hours to get lake trout, but they didn't get anywhere close enough. I think the closest they got was 45 foot. They were cold, shivering, 45-degree water. We jumped back in the boat, and they were all upset. They're like, man, we really want a lake trout to come home. I got trolling rods out. We started putting out the spread. We had the fourth rod out. Boom, fish on. Reeling that one in. Boom, the other rod's going off. We ended up with 2-man limit in less than 30 minutes. They were ecstatic. They had enough lake trout for the next 2 months, they said. So we pulled in, went back home, got warm. And yeah, it's tough. That's the difference. Spearfishing takes intense individual effort, patience, and skill. That's why I see underwater spearfishing as a definition of fair chase. It's about the individual, not technology. That's about it. I guess if I can rebuttal Paul when he talked about 10% of the anglers harvesting 70% of the fish for underwater spearfishing, the Pareto principle, I don't know if you're familiar with it, 10% of anglers catch 90% of the fish. It's just an observation. It's not like a law or anything. Well, that's that. But I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next is Mitchell Nelson. We are now transitioning to the 3-minute presentation.
I'm loving the spearfishing stuff. I'm learning a lot today. This is great. But I'm here to talk about coyotes. My name is Mitchell Nelson, State Director for the Humane World for Animals, formerly Humane, Green. Oh, there we go. Wow, big difference. My name is Mitchell Nelson. I'm the Michigan State Director for Humane World for Animals, formerly the Humane Society of the United States. I'm going to talk about coyotes again today, but first I just wanted to say, in light of the horrific political violence yesterday, I know you guys take a lot of heat sometimes. People can get really intense in here, but I think I speak for everyone when I say we really appreciate your service and the sacrifice you make to be here and do this role for the betterment of our state. So just wanted to leave with that. But first, again, we're here talking about coyotes. For some reason, we couldn't just stick with the decision from last year based on sound science upheld by the courts. Nothing necessarily, forcing us to reevaluate that. No new abundance of science that's upending it. But here we are talking about coyotes again. And today I'm going to, instead of just sitting here complaining, I'm going to actually reinforce again some of the problems and the risks of year-round hunting of coyotes on public lands. Again, public lands, private lands, you can take care of coyotes if they're threatening your property, your livestock, your family, your pets. We all need to understand that. That's an important distinction. But compensatory reproduction. Coyotes respond to heavy hunting pressure with higher pup survival, larger litters, and increased immigration from surrounding areas. Research shows that indiscriminate killing does not reduce coyote population long term and can destabilize packs, leading to more breeding pairs. Again, all of this is cited. I'll send it to all you guys. In other words, coyote biologists find that increasing the killing of coyotes will accomplish nothing except to potentially increase the coyote population. Now, when it comes to pack and territory stability, stable coyote packs regulate their own populations based on the availability of food and habitat. Typically, only the dominant pair in a pack reproduce while breeding by subordinate members is behaviorally suppressed. Removing one or both members of the dominant pair disrupts these dynamics, allowing subordinate members to pair and mate. Increased livestock conflicts. We've talked about this a lot. Top carnivore scientists and wildlife agencies across the country have found that indiscriminate killing of coyotes can escalate conflicts with livestock. As lethal control causes coyote populations to expand, coyotes are forced to find larger and easier prey, like sheep, to feed bigger litters of pups. It's important to note that most coyotes do not prey on livestock. USDA data shows that all carnivores combined are responsible for less than 0.5% of sheep and cattle losses. What's more, coyotes are beneficial to farmers and ranchers. They eat rodents and other animals that damage crops and scavenge animal carcasses. Stable coyote packs can even serve as guardian animals that deter other predating animals. I've got a lot more, and I'll make sure you all see it before next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Rusty Lorenz.
Bingo, it's me. I'm nervous. I don't know if I should do this. Jonathan said, can you come in here? You didn't say there's all these people here. Is it on? Good to go. All right. I wrote a beautiful speech that I'm going to kind of bag. I'll hand it to you because all my topics have been covered. So I'm going to sit here and say that I bought a boat to go spearfishing. It's really fun. You should try it. And Jonathan bought a brand new boat too to go spearfishing. Who else bought a boat to specifically go spearfishing? 7, 8. So there's an economic benefit to what we're doing. We went to a tournament up north in Alpena. And I had to get a hotel that night, and we had to buy food. We went to restaurants, so there is some definite economic benefit. I personally have yet to see anyone who's had an issue with me spearfishing. They all think it's great, it's fantastic. You know, how do you do it? Matter of fact, most people that I've talked to have no idea you can spearfish in Michigan. They don't know. I say you can shoot a walleye. I told them they could shoot a carp and a bullhead or whatever for years and years. But this walleye thing is new, and they just don't know. So, is there controversy? I don't know of any. And most people I say I go spearfishing, they're like, "What's that?" Like, take me. I want to go. Everybody wants to go. I've taken my kids. They've now bought fishing license, and they really haven't bought fishing license in years. They just kind of like, why we go fishing? Well, now it's a whole other world to go underwater and hang out with the fish. It's really amazing. My first trip, I shot a dogfish. Jonathan took me. He's a good guy. He took me. Anyway, he gets walleye and I get a dog. He makes this look easy. That guy, he films his stuff. He's amazing. It's hard. It's really hard. It took me 3 trips to get my first walleye. So I wrote up a thing. Jonathan's like, you can't say this, but I'm going to say it. We do not snag. So what we do is we put on a wetsuit, a mask, and a snorkel. We put on long fins, a weight belt, goggles, and a hoodie. We grab a spear gun, jump in the water. Then you need to hold your breath, do a duck dive, clear your ears so you don't hurt your ears, get to the bottom. All right. Then you need to look for a fish. If you happen to see a fish, you got to identify it. Is it a walleye? Then you got to identify its length. How long is it? If you happen to see a fish. All right, and you're holding your breath. Did I say that? You're still holding your breath as you're looking for a fish, and is it good enough to harvest? Now you got to get it a little closer to you in order to spear it. And the fish is moving, and now you're moving because you're swimming. So you're moving, the fish is moving, and you try and give it a shot. You know, it's so hard. It's really, really hard. I guess I'm going to stop. I don't know. I could talk and talk and talk. You guys have any questions for me? No one's asked a question. Who's got a question? I got 30 more seconds.
You got 3.
3 seconds. It's fun. It's hard. It's you should try it. Expand the rules. Expand the turf so that we can go more places. And expand the species.
I got a question for
you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm curious. I was going to ask some of the folks
providing information on underwater spearfishing and your passion for it. I think it's really cool and interesting, and appreciate Jonathan's relationship with the commission over the last several years. With the concept of, I also really appreciate the fisheries division, the work that they put in with the working group and a lot of the considerations that are being presented for us to think about. If you think about expansion, you said you'd like to go to other places. Where specifically are you interested in going that you can't go now? We've heard some other commenters talk about up north, or where are the areas that are of high interest for expansion?
So our fishing tournament was in Alpena, and the water clarity was decent. The fishing wasn't. I think we fished, some of my friends over here, and we got 7 walleye the whole day, or some 10 or whatever.
Between all competitors, I think we harvested 46 and we're harvesting.
Well, they're better than me. I didn't get any. I shot a sheep's head. But we couldn't go north. We could not go like even 10 miles north. So that would have been helpful while we were in Alpena just to swing up north and see if there are fish there. The tournament was, there was a time when we had to clock out. At 3 o'clock, we had to be there weighing our fish, or whatever time it was, 2 o'clock. We could start anywhere in the state of Michigan. We could start in the Saginaw Bay if we wanted, but we had to be up there. So more opportunity, like Mackinac would be great. I go to the UP sometimes. It'd be fun to try it, to fish up there. I don't know why not. The water's clear up there. And another thing about opportunity is if it's wavy in Rogers City, we can't fish in Rogers City. We can, if for roughish. If it's wavy in Tawas, we could maybe, or in the Thumb, we could go around the corner. If the wind's blowing from the east to west, you could maybe find a cove to go to get out of the way. So if there's more opportunity, we could go. I mean, why not try and chase a walleye at Mullet Lake? It's a huge lake, bird lake. Well, why not? Like, why not?
Let's focus on the Great Lakes.
Hey, ask me another question. This is starting to get fun.
Thank you. I have one.
Yeah, all right.
I'm curious to know if you had, especially beginning as a beginner spearfisherman, have you had any close calls as far as drowning, or have you seen or witnessed anybody in a situation like that?
I personally have not. I did carry once a long line that has an end on it to put a fish on it if you happen to catch a fish. And I was swimming, it was dragging below me, and I was swimming, and it got caught on a rock and just stopped me. I was swimming, and all of a sudden, boom, I stopped. I'm like, oh, my line. So I grabbed my line and put it in my weight belt and swam. But no, I haven't. I mean, that could have potentially been a little more dangerous, but you could scuba dive, or you could snorkel and dive anytime, in different times. So I don't see how that should be a safety issue. You could do this without a spear gun or whatever. So.
Any other questions? Thank you.
So I have to leave now?
You're done. The cane comes out. Next is Megan Aronco. Did I pronounce it? Did I slaughter it?
No, usually people slaughter it, it's okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, commissioners and director. My name is Megan Horodko, and I am secretary of the Michigan Spearfishing Association. I am a wildlife biologist currently pursuing my master's at the University of Michigan. As one of the few women in both the Michigan Spearfishing Association and the DNR's Underwater Spearfishing Work Group, I take a lot of pride in creating growth and opportunity for other women in this sport. At our July work group meeting, I had hoped to share an important perspective, but I didn't really get the chance. I'm grateful for the opportunity to express it here with you today. There's a common misconception that spearfishing is just as simple as diving down and taking the first fish you see, but as many people said today, it's a lot harder than that. My experience has been very different. I began in 2024 after recovering from back surgery and quickly learned that the sport requires calmness under extreme discomfort, strong breath holding, and facing challenges like currents, waves crashing over your head, and extremely poor visibility. Finding fish is often the hardest part. Hours can pass without even seeing your first target. This year, I was only able to harvest my first few rough fish at our tournament, and I'm still working towards my first game species. Mastering this form of take requires lots of time and lots of practice. The challenge is what makes the sport meaningful. Every success is earned, and every dive deepens your connection to the Great Lakes ecosystem. Spearfishing is also more than harvest. It's a full immersion into the underwater environment. Expanding opportunities will grow and diversify our community even more, encourage more women and new participants, support local economies, and give people the chance to pursue their passion maybe a little closer to home. I also want to highlight the respect and support that we've received from many of Michigan hook and line anglers. In both my time on the water and as secretary, every interaction has been positive during our tournament. During our tournament this year, about a dozen anglers approached us with curiosity and genuine interest. Once they understood that spearfishers follow nearly the same regulations and rules they do, the conversations turned into mutual respect. That recognition that we are all held to the same standards of responsible harvest strengthens Michigan's angling community as a whole. And as a wildlife biologist, I also see the ecological value of spearfishing. Unlike many harvest methods, it's completely selective. There's no bycatch. Divers target exactly the fish they intend to take and nothing else. While in the water, we are also stewards of the Great Lakes, also often picking up discarded lines, plastics, and trash. We also can serve as community citizen scientists. We directly get to observe fish populations, invasive species, habitat conditions, giving us a very unique perspective on the health of these ecosystems. Expanding opportunities for spearfishing is not only good for our community, but also supports conservation, stewardship, and a deeper understanding of our waters. I just want to finish by saying on the behalf of our Spearfishing Association, I respectfully ask that you consider these points as you vote on the future of expansion of our underwater regulations. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, a quick question for you.
Yeah.
If your group could choose between expansion or expansion of species, what would you choose? Expansion of boundary? It would be water.
Yeah, in my personal, it would be water. Like many of us, we have to drive many hours to even get to legal waters and to be able to get our game species. I think we are fine with the game species that we have now. We can work with that, in my personal opinion. But to have access to even northern Lake Michigan, more northern Lake Huron, even Lake Superior, Lake Erie, I mean, I'm all for having more waters and opportunity for this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next is Jason, I think it's Carter?
Carter?
Carter, yeah. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jason Carter. I appreciate you giving me a chance to speak today. I grew up on Sanford Lake. I've always been a fishing, or rod and reel fisherman. Ever since I moved to Michigan, even when I was born in Texas, that's all I did was fishing with rod. I decided to try spearfishing this past year. I've been spearfishing since the fall, spring. I spent about 40 hours in the water, and I still haven't got any fish yet, because it's not as easy as what people might think it might be. Honestly, it's a lot harder, but even with the challenges, I absolutely love being in the water. Spearfishing isn't just about catching fish, it's about being part of the environment. Learning how the fish move, it's also super selective. There are no bycatches, no gut fish hooked, and no fish lolling the lures and snag them and kill them that way. I also recover all the garbage I come across on the bottom of the lakes, helps protect our waters. I'm asking to support the new spearfishing regulations of considering expanding the waters. That's it.
Thank you. Roger Terry.
My name is Roger Terry. Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time and opportunity to speak. Background, I've been an avid outdoorsman for over 35 years. I've spent thousands of hours in Michigan waters, fishing, hunting, with a particular passion for northern pike. Over the years, I've caught hundreds of pike, legally, including dozens over 30 inches, several exceeding 40. I know these fish well, their habits, their habitat, the skill it takes to catch them. 2 years ago, I took that passion underwater and began spearfishing. I expected my experience to translate easily, but I quickly learned that spearfishing is a completely different challenge. In over 100 hours spent on the water, I've only seen 2 northern pike, and yet to harvest a single one. Despite decades of experience targeting them, spearfishing is not easy. It needs a unique combination of skill, patience, environmental conditions that make success far from guaranteed. It's not just about the time of the water, it's about conditions. More often than not, you make the 2-hour drive, 3-hour drive, and just to find out that you can't see 2 feet. With that being said, I have recently purchased into a bunch of fishing equipment because I've never fished the Great Lakes. I've always been an inland lake fisherman. So now I have the choice that if I get to somewhere I have one of this, I throw the hook and lines out, which is, a lot easier to get my limit. So, but the reality of spearfishing is that, we understand it's not high yield sport. It's a high effort, low impact way to connect to nature. Spearfishing also promotes a deeper respect for our aquatic ecosystem. You're not casting blindly or relying on bait. You're immersed in the environment, observing fish behavior firsthand, and making a split-second decision that requires discipline and restraint. It's a sport that naturally encourages ethical harvest and conservation. I'm here today to advocate for expanding spearfishing regulations to include all Great Lakes and connecting waterways and all fish species, with the exception of the muskie and sturgeon, which I fully support protecting. This expansion will not only support reasonable recreation, but also align with the values of conservation, fairness, and access. It would allow more outdoorsmen and women to responsibly enjoy the sport while maintaining the integrity of our fisheries. Spearfishing harvests a deeper connection with our waters and wildlife. It's not just a sport, it's a way to engage with nature in a respectful, low-impact way. I urge the committee to recognize that reality of spearfishing and support its growth throughout the thoughtful regulation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas Mack.
How's it going? My name is Thomas Mack. I'm from Ohio. I run an ecotourism business there. I've been fishing my whole life. I've honestly probably worn out more fishing rods than a normal man has days on the water. So fishing's always been a part of who I am, and that's what brought me here today. The past year, I decided to try something new, spearfishing here in Michigan. On my very first trip, I spent 3 days in the water with some great mentors, and I only came home with 2 fish. At first thought, 2 fish in 3 days, that's kind of rough. But they laughed and told me it was actually a great first trip. Most people don't even see walleye. That really put it into perspective for me. This isn't some easy shortcut. It's a tough, physical, skill-based sport, and that's what hooked me. I am actually here on my 2nd trip now, diving during the same week as this meeting, and I've been blown away by the community. Everyone's helpful, safety-focused, following the rules, even picking up trash at the bottom. What really stuck with me was how they handled interactions with rod and reel anglers. Every encounter I saw was positive. One diver got a little too close to someone fishing that wasn't with us, and an experienced guy pulled him aside right away, explained why it wasn't okay, and taught him the right etiquette. That really impressed me. It showed me the community looks out for each other and takes responsibility for doing things the right way. Here's the part I struggle with, is access. I started fly fishing 5 years ago, and if somebody had told me I could only use a fly rod in certain waters, I would be kind of confused. That's what's happening with the spearfishing now. I drive 5 hours from Ohio just to do this, and now I've got multiple friends back home, all lifelong outdoorsmen, who are begging to come with me and do this as well. That kind of speaks to the point of the financial benefits, tourism dollars coming over to Michigan from Ohio. So my ask is simple: expand the waters open to spearfishing for the species we already have. It doesn't increase biological risk. It does make access more fair for people across the state and other states surrounding. It spreads out effort instead of bottling it up in certain areas, and it lets this community keep proving what it's already seen. That spearfishers are safe, responsible, and committed to taking care of Michigan waters. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Bobby Prater?
Good afternoon, sir, and commissioners. I'm retired U.S. Army Chief Warrant Officer Bobby Prater, and I guess I was thinking about what kind of speech or what am I going to put up to you guys and talk about, and I think part of it's demographics is like my age and maybe that I retired from the military. Some of the guys over here have also been in the military. Travis served, Riley is the current member of the Michigan Army National Guard, and is, I don't know, I don't think there's anybody else over there, but and I guess promote spearfishing or support spearfishing, and then also the expansion of the waters. I'm currently on a boat on White Lake, which is the first lake north Muskegon. And if I want to spearfish walleye, I've got to travel all the way down to Grand Haven in order to spearfish walleye, if the visibility is good enough to do it. And lining up the visibility with a nice day and the time to go is a challenge in itself. And then I guess I'd like to share a story about our spearfishing tournament in Alpena. Maybe not to be as entertaining as Rusty, but this year I only took one walleye, but it was a decent one, I think it was like 23 inches, and then one drum. And at weigh-in, I told John that he identified as a walleye, but he wouldn't, he didn't taste the same either. And then also, during that day, we were spearfishing on the south side of Thunder Bay, and we were only about 15 feet of water, something like that. And when you get in the water, you can't present yourself as a predator, because the fish see that. You know, if you're out hunting and chasing them, they're just going to swim away from you. So I'm floating in the water, looking around. I look over toward deeper water, and there's something swimming toward me. I don't know what fisheries are doing up in Alpena, and it's about 10, 12 feet wide, and it's black, coming straight at me. I just couldn't figure out what it was, and I just stayed still. And it was thousands of bullhead catfish came and just surrounded me. And I had no idea there were swarms that big or, you know, bait balls that big that were in Thunder Bay. But it was pretty interesting. And then we determined that you spook them in just their presence. The walleye, there was no walleye to shoot because they'd go through and just tear up all the grass and just stir everything up. You couldn't see anything anyway. But I guess in closing, just supporting, increasing our areas that we can shoot fish. Support spearfishing. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Ken, is it?
Hackeyes?
Yes.
Yes, sir. All right, so you guys get a lot of flack all the time. I know that. And you guys get these comments, people say to you, you know, your actions have consequences. Well, Justin and I are here today because if it wasn't for your actions, there would be somebody dead. Because of your decision to allow freshwater spearfishing, it put us in Holland, Michigan 2 years ago. We wouldn't have been there any other reason, but we were going for walleye. Gentleman was drowning. He was on the pier, jumped in. Current was ripping. He was getting pulled out. There's life rings on that pier. Do you think anybody grabbed one? 30 people, Justin, standing on that pier? Yeah. Everybody's staring at the man, drifting out in this really wicked rip current, and he's struggling to survive. And he's starting to bob. And I told Justin, I said, I'm gonna go get him. I'm gonna go get him. I said, you get to the boat, start the boat up, I'll take my dive float. I'm gonna go get him. Boats are driving past him, nobody can care. He's trying, struggling for his life. Swam out there, got the buoy in front of him, and we saved his life. It took every effort I had in my body to get him back to that pier. And it took the people on the pier to help lift him on, took them on the pier to help pull me up because I had nothing left in me to fight against that current. But because of your actions, that consequence saved a life. So if anything you take home great today from this experience today is be proud of yourself, you saved somebody's life.
because I would not be at Holland Pier for any other reason other than to try to spearfish for walleye that day. I'm on the board with the National Freshwater Spearfishing Association of America. We're the largest freshwater spearfishing association in the world, and we support the Michigan Spearfishing Association and what they're doing and trying to expand in this country and expand in Michigan. I am from Michigan. I'm from Spring Lake. This is, as Director said earlier, this is the greatest waters in the world for freshwater. I get the privilege of going all over this country and dive all these different waters for all these different events and things. And everybody I've ever brought here is nothing less than impressed with how incredible our waters are and how massive they are and the opportunities we have. And I implore anybody who argues that spearfishing is going to decimate to show me anywhere in the country where it's been approved, and there's a lot of places it's been for a long time. Please show me the facts, not emotions, but the facts where it has decimated anything and has been recalled. If you look at the facts, and we don't manage by emotions, we manage by facts, you will notice that nothing has been recalled. Everything is only being advanced more and more and more. So I love the documentation that says otherwise, because it doesn't exist. So that's what I'm here today, is to support this expansion. I do believe in the expansion of the waters. I do believe that we don't need the species. If not, crawl, walk, run is great with everybody, but the waters will be wonderful. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is Brian Mulping?
He had to leave for work. He was sitting here.
And Justin Subliski?
Stugleski. So I'm Justin Sableski. I just want to thank you guys for the opportunity that you have to have opened up the waters, commissioners and director. Appreciate the opportunity. I just want to give you an example of where I come from as someone who, as a little boy, fished with his grandfather in Lansing, right here in town. And I didn't give a second thought to fishing after he passed away. It was just something that I didn't do. And Ken, my good friend, introduced me to spearfishing in 2020. I had a wetsuit for boogie boarding. I love the water. I want to be in the water. I love to swim. And this gave me an opportunity to get back into something that I haven't done since my grandfather passed away. It's a challenge. This is not something that's easy. It's not for the faint of heart. I'm PADI certified level 1 free diver, so I have to go, we certified dive last summer. So it's something that you have to be physically fit for this. You have to have the mind for this. And I believe in conservation. I don't shoot to kill fish just because it's for sport. It's not for ego for me. It is something that I enjoy doing. I love being in the water. And I just want to give you, this summer so far, I only had a total of 13 and a half hours across 5 sessions in the water, over 119 dives. That averages about 36 seconds a dive. I'm in about 20, 25 feet of water. And out of that time, crunching those numbers, I was underneath the water for only 71 minutes, cumulative. That's 71 minutes over 5 sessions that I have to find and shoot a fish. So in that time, that's 9% of my total dive. 91% of the time, I'm on the surface. I'm reloading my gun, I'm breathing up, I'm watching my buddy to make sure we're safe, so we don't lose anybody. Because everyone who goes out of the water comes back, right? So out of that time, I've only ever taken 8 fish this season. So it's something where the success rate, 3 out of 5 of the sessions, didn't get anything. There's the conditions, there's the current, there's the clarity, the drive for some of these people. I live in Muskegon. I can't even fish out of my own backyard. And I see walleye. I can't take them. I don't want rough fish. That's not what I'm fishing for. I want table fare. And, when we look at equal opportunities and equity, people, I pay for a license like everyone else. I want to be able to fish like everyone else. You use a reel and rod. I use my lungs. I use my physicality. And I use a spear gun. That's it. But it's a challenge. And it's something that we're just looking for an opportunity to open up access to the same waters that everyone else has, that they're paying for in that license, and to, eventually more species. Because at the end of the day, I can buy a license in Florida, fish the same fish that any Floridian can get. So that's the opportunity that I'm looking for, and hopefully you guys can take that to the bank for everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you. Tristan, is it, oh, excuse me, Trish. All right. Is Trish here? Trish Reardon?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm not with the fishing.
Oh,
So,
you're one of those.
yeah. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Like I said, I'm not here to talk about fish. I was at the August meeting, and I'm here to talk about the very confusing resolution that, in my opinion, is you came up with to be a workaround your own rules. If they want to make a regulation, you don't mess with it for 2 years to see how it works out. Resolution was full of whereases, and I guess that's the way you're supposed to frame it, but one of the whereases was because there's too many coyotes. No one there said that. The DNR people who were there, the DNR coyote people, repeatedly said, we have no idea how many coyotes we have. We've never counted them. Don't know if they're increasing, don't know if they're decreasing. Following whereas said, well, because we have too many coyotes, they're spreading disease. No one said that. And the DNR people were repeatedly asked leading questions such as, isn't it true if there's too many animals in an area, they could spread disease? There's a lot of ifs in there. Too many animals, they could possibly spread disease. Number one, we don't know if there's too many coyotes. That we have no evidence they're spreading disease, so increasing their killing through the period when they're trying to raise families because of those two things, I mean, that's false on its premise. We don't know either of those things. Coyotes they're not merely targets. They're living creatures, sentient creatures with an interest in their own lives. They are already negotiating a human-built world of houses everywhere, roads everywhere, forest tracks everywhere, ATVs, mountain bikes, snowmobiles, and trying to raise families through all this. It seems like the least we could do is give them a quiet period while they're raising families. Nobody's saying you can't kill coyotes. They're just saying while they have puppies that heal, maybe give them a quiet period. It's the ethical thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And the courts upheld the science. So if you want to go back to science, the court said you followed it. So I think that needs to be revisited and, leave the original coyote resolution that gave them the quiet period. It's not a lot to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Lance Devoe.
Hello, I'm Lance DeVoe. I'm Vice President of Michigan Bow Hunters. I'm on the Board of Trustees of Michigan Gun Owners. I'm on the Board of Directors of Gilbert Sportsman's Club in Macomb County. I'm here to talk about bow fishing. Yes, bow fishing. So I'd like to start off saying that I think spearfishing is great. I was about 30 years younger, probably take up another hobby. I didn't even know that was legal in Michigan until a short time ago. But I think it's very cool, and I'm all for it. As a matter of fact, I also spearfish with a pointy stick, and but we're not allowed to shoot game fish. Since now we're opening it up, since you've opened up that Pandora's box, I'd like you to consider that bow fishing is just as hard in many ways as underwater spear fishing. I could go on and give you a bunch of examples, but trust me, I shoot personally with a recurve bow. It takes countless hours of practice and so on. So it seems like listening to these guys over here that you need to present your bona fides to talk about this. So real briefly, second generation Michigan outdoorsman, hunter, and fisherman. I grew up next to Lake St. Clair and literally have been fishing since I could hold a fishing rod. I'm not nearly as entertaining as Rusty, but then who is? honestly, too, that was cool. That's really what I wanted to say is, since this has been opened up, now you're gonna be able to spearfish for game fish. I think it's very cool, I'm all for it. I think we should also consider then opening up bow fishing for game fish as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Justin Tomei.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, Director, Counselor. My name is Justin Tomei, representing Michigan United Conservation Clubs. I'm not going to talk about spearfishing or what it's like because John hasn't called me yet. I am more of the type of fisherman that Riley was describing with beer and sandwiches. But what I do want to do is clear up, or at least provide some extra context and perhaps address the uncertainty that Lucas was describing when he was talking about the spearfishing working group. I've had these conversations with him. Hopefully nothing that I say will surprise you. You know, we had 19 people, I think it was, in the spearfishing group plus fisheries division that weighed in on it. But in March at our annual convention, to my knowledge, the largest formal vote on this has happened in the state, where we had about 200 people in our convention room debate precisely what's in front of you today. We had a resolution to expand spearfishing. In front of us, our fisheries committee, a group of people came through with a proposal to basically amend that resolution and have MUCC's official position be the status quo, basically what the department is recommending today. And when our group voted, again, not statewide, not expansive, but again, the largest formal vote that I'm aware of that took place on this, the status quo was rejected with an 80% vote. Ultimately, our convention decided to support expanding underwater spearfishing to the entire Great Lakes, expanding species, excluding muskie and sturgeon. Now, I do agree with some people that there are certainly some reasonable spatial and seasonal closures that we should consider as we draft this order. But I just wanted to add that as hopefully a little bit of context, a little bit of clarification on what the uncertainty means for people. I've personally never seen a diver down flag in the state of Michigan. I'm almost 40 years old. I've been fishing here my entire life. My dad's older than me, obviously. He's never seen one. Nobody I know has really ever interacted with an underwater spear fisherman. And the department, by its own admission, has said nobody's really interacted with them in a negative way, or at least reported it. All we're going to do if we do expand the waters for them is we are going to spread those anglers out across even more water, lessening the likelihood that we're going to have negative interactions, but giving them the access that every other angler has in the state of Michigan. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. That concludes our public presentation. We will adjourn now for luncheon, followed by a closed session. And I will note the time. It's 1:25. Lunch will be 30 minutes. Closed session, I have no idea.
Just a vote. Mr. Chairman, a point of order. I'm wondering if it makes sense to offer a motion to go into closed session now or after. Are we going to resume after lunch? I'm looking at work here.
We're going to resume after lunch and then make a motion because we're all going together right now.
All right.
And some of us are not.
Never mind.
In closed session.
Overruled. So we will break now and be back and we will.
We're going to go into a closed session at 2 p.m. And then come back immediately after and then finish up with the full meeting and vote on all the fisheries orders and all the things on the agenda. So.
Thank you, Rob.